few years ago, young Adele was sitting with a book and, smiling widely, introduced himself. He was the son of a lord who ruled the land of Ridlin. Continuing their studies, they were explained that, since one day they were expected to become the lord, it was extremely important to know their lands and neighboring countries well, and they found exactly what they needed. A map of the Ryder outskirts. Sliding their finger over the illustrations, they recognized one by one the neighboring lands, the kingdom of Ardles, the holdings of Mardrev Rendhill, and what seemed to them to be the land of Count Medger. Emery disappears, returning to the present. Adele, now older, held her breath at the table, and suddenly they are struck by a sharp thought. They know the names of all these places, but have never before seen such a coincidence. The game is a game, 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 game. The consequences are incredible. They realize that reincarnation must be true, but this thought instantly shatters against contradictions. The main character, Yarcieli, a game nickname, did not look at all like. This terrible truth sinks into them. They have been reborn into the game world from a past life, but in the entire history of Yarcieli, there was no character named Adele, neither ally nor enemy. They are consumed by one panicked question: so who the hell did I reincarnate as? They rack their brains, searching for any mention of their name Adele, but nothing. Only the name Ridlick evokes a faint memory, something from inside the game store. Suddenly, all memory crashes down on them. In their past life, they recalled that Ridlick was already in ruins and completely abandoned. Something clicked in their head regarding Dawning Horror. Now they understand everything. They were not reincarnated as a key hero of the story, but instead reincarnated into a borderland doomed to destruction by one of the game's villains. It is stunning. Of all possible fates, they turn out to be a character even less noticeable than an extra in the crowd. They are desperate from the terrible fortune. No special gift, no chance to cheat, nothing, and they were born in this doomed land. If things continue this way, their new mom and dad, along with all the town's inhabitants, are doomed to die. A wave of determination pierced through fear. They clench their fists and swear to do everything to avert this tragic fate, not allowing the country to fall into ruins, for fortunately, knowledge of the game is their only advantage. But after a moment of reflection, practical problems become obvious. Judging by what they have read, the main plot of the game will begin in 9 years. They have very little time left to come up with a plan with such a meager amount of information, and the most terrifying thought suddenly overwhelms them. What if they are not even in the main story? They trace their finger over the map, which is a new result for me. Now, having studied the surrounding peoples, they can discover the true cause of the future destruction of their homelands. Turns out their land, Ridlick, is completely surrounded. To the north, the land of death, to the west, vast forest, and to the south and east, the domains of Count Major and Martyr Vrando Hill, and they are gripped by a grim realization: each of these neighboring lands is ruled by one of the game's superpowerful villains. They clearly remember the specific threats: demons in the north seeking to annihilate humanity, the witch's curse in the west, an enemy on the level of the final boss, the notoriously cruel daughter of Margrave Randohill in the south, and the reckless demonic son of Count Major in the east, who casts spells. The scale of this danger is simply overwhelming. They cry out in despair, not understanding how some minor nobleman can possibly stand against threats coming from all sides. Their panic gradually subsides and turns into grim analysis. The game's legends say that one of these villains once destroyed this land, but who exactly was never said, because it was not considered important for the main story. Only 9 years remain until the plot begins, so the villains must already be making their moves, and the bitter realization of their hopelessness falls upon everyone. Guided by this knowledge, they set out to the northern outskirts, to the dreadful land of death. In front of a ruined hut in the gloomy wasteland, they gather there. Well, if their memory of the game does not fail them, it is here they will find an ally without whom it will be impossible to avoid the approaching catastrophe. Before they could react, a voice tore through the silence. A boot blocked their path. A figure in a hood stepped out of the shadows and pressed the cold steel of a dagger to their throat. The stranger demanded their names and threatened consequences if they did not comply. The figure of Coded dashed with incredible speed and instantly appeared behind Adele. Frightened, she stumbled over her words, apologized, not understanding how it happened, and whispered one name: Kane. The figure lowered the hood and sheathed the dagger, revealing long light hair and pointed ears, and in a calm voice asked Adele if something had happened. When they heard the names aloud, Kane flinched and urgently asked Adele to speak more quietly, and this reaction finally confirmed to Adele this was indeed Kane, whose name she knew from Dawning Horror as one of the names of the game's villains. In Adele's head, legends raced. Kane Arceus is one of the most powerful characters in the game, a potential final boss. His name became synonymous with cold-blooded cruelty. He killed countless people to earn the title of demonic prime minister ruling the world. They remembered, according to the game's plot, Cain was destined to fall into darkness for some reason and unleash a war against humanity. But the plot also says that in childhood he lived precisely in this remote place, and when Adele realized this, she was overwhelmed with such a wave of relief that the risk of coming here proved justified. Sudden, brilliant insight struck Dell. The main events of the game were still 9 years away, which meant that all the characters destined to become powerful villains were now just children. New path grew in Dell's mind. If now, while these future enemies were still young, they could be persuaded to join their side, it would be possible not only to avoid their own death, but also to gain powerful allies instead of fighting or fleeing. Another strategy emerged. The plan was not to defeat the villains, but to turn them to their side, to protect their land and avoid the banners of death. They were even ready to turn enemies into allies, and decided that this was their only chance to survive. Now all that remained was to decide how to persuade Cain to their side. While they were thinking, Cain coughed weakly. Suddenly Adele, Cain's mother, came up with an idea. The camera pushed open the wooden door and entered an empty room. The door quietly closed behind it, and a woman with long light hair sat on a simple bed. A soft smile played on her face, and she asked who had come. He instantly lunged at Adele, demanding to know who had given her permission to enter. But Adele froze at the beauty of that woman, wondered if she was Cain's friend, and when someone apologized for the intrusion, she noticed her pointed ears, a characteristic feature of a demonic enemy. The resemblance was undeniable. Looking at them, Adele was sure they were both demons. Everything was confirmed what they remembered from the game. Both were hiding in this shabby shack to avoid persecution by humans. Jane gently asked his mother to return to sleep, noticing that she still had a fever. At that moment, Adele recalled a grim detail from the future. Their hidden shelter would one day be found by humans, and they would be driven out. A grim future from that story flashed in her memory. Cain's mother would die of illness, and this would set him on a path of revenge that would destroy the kingdom. So the woman before her was crucial. By saving her, she would gain Cain's trust. She stepped forward and confidently introduced herself as Del Ridlick, the rightful heir of Lord Ridlick. Cain was stunned and exclaimed, "Lord." His mother also did not hide her surprise. Del addressed the sick woman, saying she had heard about her fever, to which the mother anxiously confirmed the fever does not go away, although they have tried all kinds of medicines and treatments. Her face paled with sadness as she added that it was even worse, her health was only deteriorating. With a worried look, she feverishly apologized to Adele, fearing she had burdened her with this weight. While Cain looked at his mother, deep anxiety was evident on his face. In response to the woman's despair, Adele extended her hand and directly asked, "If I say that I can cure your illness, madam, will you believe me?" The offer left both the mother and Sana speechless. Cain stammered, unable to say anything, and his mother froze. A tiny glimmer of hope mixed with distrust flashed in her eyes, and she whispered aloud whether a cure was really possible. Noticing their hesitation, Adele asked if it was hard for them to believe her words. Cain immediately exploded, shouting at her to stop talking nonsense, while his mother responded more calmly, admitting that yes, of course, it was hard to believe. Despite their skepticism, Adele made a bet to prove her sincerity. "So, how about this?" she said, looking directly at the king. "If it turns out that I am lying, kill me without hesitation." And the seriousness of this proposal stunned the king and his entourage. He followed Adele into the dungeon, hidden deep in the northern forest, carrying a small elven child in his arms. With a suspicious expression, he demanded to know what they were supposed to do in such a place, and Adele just smiled and brightened up a little, noticing that of all places he had brought them exactly to the dungeon. Memory of a recent conversation surfaced in his mind. His mother gently reproached him for the tone he used when addressing the Son of God, asking if he really believed that there were any miraculous cures for her illness. Then with a slight smile she waved it off and told him not to worry. Deep in the stone corridor, Adele leads Cain and his mother Mercia to a dark arched opening. Mercia looks worried, and Adele confidently says that this place will suit their purpose. She turns to Cain, points to the opening with a confident smile, and asks him to have his mother cast the initial water spell right here. Cain and Mercia freeze in surprise. Adele explains that this is exactly why she brought them, reminding them of his mother's illness and her offer. He immediately objects, saying that his mother has long been bedridden and probably does not have the strength even for a spell. Adele waves it off and explains that it is not about strength, a simple initial spell will suffice. Cain irritably declares that the situation is hopeless, tells his mother they need to leave, muttering that it was foolish to trust the person. His words make Adele shudder, and she quietly asks if he is running away. To stop the questions, he interrupts them. Cain turns around, his face tightens, and he firmly says that he is risking his own life, throwing down a direct challenge whether they intend to run away from his risky proposal. And his mother, caught between them, looks from him to Adele and asks to confirm that only a simple water spell is needed. She looks pleadingly at her son, with quiet determination. The mayor Chadle's cane is what she wants to place her faith in, entrusting it to Master Adele. Achieved by decision, Adele mentally admits that she was worried she feared they would leave. She confirms aloud that a simple initial spell will suffice. Then quietly and resolutely she mutters, accepting the consequence. Landing on the stone floor, Marisha raises her hands, her body trembling slightly as she gathers energy. Kane looks at her with a tense, worried expression. Adele's voice rings out, urging Marisha to release the spell with full force. She is confident that this spectacle will convince. She releases the spell, and a colossal splash of water bursts from the magic circle, rushing forward with incredible force. The furious stream hits the stone masonry around, instantly flooding the entire chamber. Kane stands in the newly formed puddle, frozen in dumb silence with his mouth agape in disbelief, while Adele remains composed. He sees the worlds in Dell and shouts, demanding to know why the spell is so strong. He exclaims that the initial spell would barely be enough even to water plants, and asks what Dell did to his mother. With a calm, insightful gaze, Adele turns to him and confesses, this incredible power is not despite Mersha's condition, but actually a direct consequence of her illness. Sudden realization hit Kane with incredible force. His face reddened, tears welled up in his eyes. He struggled to comprehend, and looking at Master Adele, stammered, asking what she meant and how this could possibly be related to his mother's illness. Mayor Shah, his mother, spoke with a voice filled with new lightness. She told Kane that after casting the water spell, the oppressive weight left her body, and Adele watched them nearby. Gaining courage, she tries to stand on her own, but her legs buckle on the slippery, wet ground, and she lets out a quiet scream, stumbling forward. Even before she fell, Adele managed to catch her and extend a helping hand. Mayor Shah sincerely apologizes, explaining that a lot of time has passed since she last stood. Adele, worried, looks at her and assures that everything is fine. Pressing against Adele, she revealed her despair, sincerely confessed that she believed she would never stand again and had already resigned herself to the thought that the illness would eventually take her life. Tears of gratitude rolled down her face. She looked at Adele and thanked her from the bottom of her heart, and Adele only quietly replied that it was quite natural. Adele sighs with relief inside. She was confident that this method would work thanks to her previous knowledge, and is incredibly glad that she was not mistaken. But her satisfaction was suddenly interrupted. She noticed that the water from the spell made Mersha's shirt completely transparent, and this stunned her for a moment. They are still in an awkward pose. Mersha presses on them and keeps apologizing, and Adele panics inside. If Kem sees his mother in such a state, all the goodwill they have built will collapse. Mayor Shaw apologizes again, says she is still exhausted, and asks Adele not to overexert herself, and the young gentleman becomes even more embarrassed because of this. So it could not just come by calling them. Embarrassed, Adele confirms his presence, and he immediately asks how his mother could be healed with just one spell. They began to tell, and it became clear. Mersha was struck by mana sickness. In simple terms, it is like poisoning that occurs when mana accumulates too much in the body. Pain repeats in disbelief, mana sickness, and wonders how such a thing can exist, and Adele simply says that it is true. Meanwhile, Mersha, with eyes under the bandage, silently listens to the conversation. The realization strikes right at the heart, filling it with remorse. Kane turns to Adele and sincerely apologizes for all his past offenses and hostile behavior. Mersha reflects on her actions, clenches her fist, and admits to herself that the history of suffering of her people, demons caused by humans, made it impossible for her to trust Adele. Kane kneels before Adele, his voice full of conviction. He says that Adele was so kind that she taught them how to save his mother, even risking her own life, and solemnly pronounces his name, Kane Arceus. Then he swears eternal loyalty to Adele. Ernest Vala's sudden action leaves Adele speechless for a moment, a slight blush appearing on her cheeks. The one who came looks with a soft, sincere expression. Leaning down, Adele takes his hand and helps him up, saying that they are glad he is with them. Mersha stands nearby and watches the scene. A few days later, in a mansion resembling an attraction, the butler solemnly presents a tray with freshly brewed tea to Master Adele. Adele thanks Kane. It seems he brought the tea. Kane confirms that his mother, Mayor Shaw, will also go to the dungeon today and has diligently practiced water spells under Adele's guidance, and she adds that boundaries of action have already been set for Kane and Mayor Shaw in the estate. He pondered the strange nature of his mother's ailment. It is hard to believe that there is a disease that only worsens with rest and requires active use of spells to restore mana. Kane listened carefully as Adele continued to explain that mana sickness occurs when the body restores more mana than it can hold. This excess begins to harm, and releasing this mana alleviates the symptoms. And shuddering, he realized that if his mother had continued the previous treatment, her life would have been in danger. He was filled with admiration for the depth of this knowledge. He was not ashamed to say that he expected nothing less from a stortle. Adele, taking a sip from the cup, modestly brushed off the praise and noted that it was just knowledge from the game. His expression softened, his cheeks flushed, and he insisted that it was more. He swore to give the rest of his life to repay not only for saving his mother, but also for giving demons a place where they could belong without prejudice. Later, Adele opened a book and traced a route on the map with her finger, the same path where, in the original story, they were eventually killed. With this knowledge, a new goal emerged, a specific place to which they now had to go. The target was a person of great power, a mute, who lived in the western part of the forest. 3 months have passed since Adele hired Cain and his mother Marisha. During this time, Cain in his free moments did not stop honing his swordsmanship skills under the butler's supervision, while diligently performing the duties of Adele's servants together with his mother. The next morning, Marisha warmly welcomes him and gladly announces that breakfast is ready. Adele is responsible for the entire kitchen in the estate, and he sincerely thanks her for the meal. When they sit down to eat, he asks if she plans to visit the dungeon again because of her husband's treatment. She confirms, and Adele admires her dishes in his mind, which have become a dear part of his daily life. About his plans, Marisha enthusiastically offers to make him a lunchbox and says that Kaina can also keep him company. Adele stunnedly accepts the offer, but his thoughts are elsewhere. He understands that it is time to start his grand plan. To conquer the Witch of Evil. He sets off to a certain dungeon hidden deep in the northern forest. As it turned out, this place hides a special secret. In the deepest ravine of that dungeon rests the sealed and silent Sienna, and legend says that whoever breaks her seal will gain boundless power. But Adele knows the tragic truth from an old story. Sienna was deceived. Betrayal ignited hatred towards people in her, and unleashed an essence so powerful that it could destroy the world. This betrayal soon turned her into a villainess. She was feared throughout the land, the Witch of Evil, a being of incredible destructive power, whose appearance caused terror. Her seal must be obtained before anyone else. This thought devours Adele as he finally devises his plan. Somehow get to the deepest floor of the dungeon at any cost. He knows these events take place after the game's starting point, so he has 9 years. That is why he chose this place for matters with Marisha's maneuverability. But there is also a more urgent problem. A huge pile of food packed by his own mother, which he considers clearly excessive for children. He looks at the source of his barely noticeable irritation, Marisha, who with a cheerful smile, together with Cain, has set up a luxurious picnic. Adele cannot shake the feeling that she is too relaxed for their circumstances. His thoughts are interrupted by Cain's voice. Why did we come to the dungeon today? Adele thinks it is pointless to explain his grand plans for the future now. He reassures himself. It is safe here because monsters usually do not appear on this upper floor. Despite his determination to keep everything secret, his words instantly caused panic. Marisha, clasping her hands in anxiety, asked if he really intends to go into the dungeon. Cain picked up on this and exclaimed that this is clearly not a simple picnic, while Adele calmly started eating. He calms them down, explaining that although he never intends to descend to the deepest floor, today is definitely not the plan. They are only scouting and will not go to the dangerous lower levels. His explanation only slightly calms Cain. It does not bring peace to his mind. Looking at Master Dell, Cain feels how determined he is, and yet decides, since they have come this far, they can delve a little deeper together with her. He turns to his mother and, trustingly acknowledging Adele's merits, says that he has seen with what daily dedication his master works. Mayor Shah leans toward Adele and whispers that he was actually very glad about the trip and eagerly wanted to show the results of his own heart training. He is momentarily confused, but Adele gives him a reassuring smile, and he tells Cain that although he cannot show his progress today, he looks forward to the day when he can. In the dungeon, the group settles in. Marisha asks Master Adele if he can start casting spells. He sighs quietly, recalling that in the game a level of at least 20 was required to pass this dungeon, and feels relieved that Cain will not have to go alone, especially since he himself cannot help in battle. His thoughts have sharpened. He knows for sure the witch must be taken as an ally as soon as possible, because little time remains, and some evil person might remove his seal, giving it to darkness. He begins to explain his haste. The witch Sienna is incredibly attractive and has the best style among the models. He imagines the witch thanking him for removing her seal, and asking his name. This fantasy makes him blush and become completely confused. In his dream, she leans closer, promising to fulfill any wish and delight him in a great game of caresses. As the fantasy consumes him, Cain's sharp voice cuts through the air, shouting to get his attention. He stands behind Dell, completely confused, and demands to know what these three are doing here. He and Adele instantly found themselves before his mother, Mayor Sho, who angrily demands to know what they are doing here at all. Adele froze, staring ahead, eyes wide open in shock. He recognizes the figure that just appeared. Before them stood a witch with short, light hair and a pointed hat. She called herself Sienna, the Quiet Witch, and fiercely accused them of deliberately breaking into her home. Adele panics inside, shocked that the character he thought he would see much later appeared before him right now. Fear grows as he imagines a shadowy, demonic influence whispering hatred of humanity into his ear, and he desperately asks himself whether her mind has already been brainwashed or if he himself is just too lazy. Mersha questions Sina's accusations, asking what she means by trouble, and the witch glares fiercely in response and shouts whether they even slightly imagine the disaster and curse they have brought. Berger fixed his gaze on Kane, accusing me and asking if he intends to pretend he knows nothing. She decides the conversation is over. She announces that with their own bodies she will make them feel the full depth of her anger. A swirling vortex of magical energy begins to form around her as she prepares to attack. The energy explodes outward in a powerful wave, and Adele grabs Kane, ducking under the blowhigh's mind reels from the stunning force, and he realizes with horror that Sina's magic is as powerful as the final boss's. He froze in fear, and Sina laughed and declared that for angering her, they would suffer eternally in the afterlife. Breaking free from panic, he shouted urgently to Marisha, "Throw a water spell," at the which Marisha froze in surprise but understood. He quickly explains the strategy. Sina's spells are very powerful but require time. Their own magic is weaker but faster, and while Sina forms a huge sphere of dark energy, he insists Mersha act now. After a desperate shout to direct the spell at her, Mersha releases a powerful stream of water straight at the witch. The water hits the target, drenches Sina, and disrupts her spell. She screams in rage and curses them, and Adele realizes that the spell not only worked, it also created a smoke screen from the steam, giving a chance to escape. When the steam cleared, Sina's threatening aura disappeared. She stood soaking wet, pouting like a child and grumbling about being soaked, confusedly asked who they were, and then introduced herself again as Sina. Her face turned to pure confusion, exclaimed that her illusion spell had dissipated, and faced with its strange twists in events, Adele could only ask what exactly she meant. He was silent while Sienna explained that her previous formidable figure was only a fake created by illusion. Pouting, she clarified that her current, smaller body is the true form, which has a stronger presence and is better suited for battle. He went over her words in his head and asked if this very illusion would show what she would look like when she grew up. The idea that this tiny figure would be hers forever seemed to stun him. Sienna, however, was completely bewildered by his questions. One discovery stunned Kane, unbelieving muttered, "A false, illusory spell," and then called Master Adele, who seemed lost in his own thoughts. His Titan stood nearby, and he couldn't believe Ith had been so looking forward to meeting Ja, but it all turned out like this. Noticing his confusion, Sienna called him, addressing him as Devs. This name struck him, shattering the idealized image of an adult in his mind, and he burst out in a scream of despair, cursing the developers. His outburst of emotions only further confused Sienna. She asked what he meant by calling her a problem, and why he needed that water spell while he knelt in despair. Her astonishment turned into rage. Pointing directly at Adele, who was kneeling, she demanded that he listen, growling that she was constantly submerged in water because he cast spells in that very spot every day. She brushed off his embarrassment and explained in simple words how the dungeon was arranged. Although they were only on the first floor, Adele's constant powerful water spells created a cascade. Water flowed from one level to another. The relentless flow finally broke through the walls near the gate where she was sealed, flooding the room, and she remembers that horror how she almost drowned just because she wanted a peaceful night. Water completely engulfed her. Homish barely survived and had to flee to the higher levels of the dungeon. Her rage flares up stronger when she remembers that even after everything, he brazenly poured it on her directly. Her eyes narrow threateningly, and she demands to know how he intends to make amends for his actions. Sensing danger, he instantly rushed to cover Adele, ordering him to retreat. Adele froze, his eyes wide open from a sudden, terrible realization. He only wanted to help Mayor Shaw. He froze in place, and understanding crashed down on him like an avalanche. He realized that Marsh's water magic was now unlikely to be useful, and the thought that this would mean yet another doomed failure of his squeezed his heart. He could only make a hesitant sound, not knowing what to do next. Before he could do anything, Mayor Shaw rushed forward and loudly, desperately apologized. Kane reached out to stop his mother, but she had already bent low. Slightly straightening up, she explained that she had been casting water magic as part of her treatment course, and this confession caught Sienna and Adele by surprise. Sienna spoke first, gently assuring the woman that they bore her no grudge and had no intention of harming her. Despite the assurances, Mayor Shaw continued to plead, saying she did not mind if their anger fell on her, but begged to spare the two standing behind her. To this, Adele stepped forward. He agreed with Marsh, but explained that he was also to blame after all. He was the one who ordered her to cast the spell there. Together, he and Kane Bod sincerely apologized. He stood bent over, his voice trembling with regret. Though he had no intention to cause harm, he admitted that he was terribly sorry for the great trouble he had caused. Look clenches his fist, finally understanding. Kane also steps forward and sincerely apologizes for his offensive behavior, and from afar Sienna seems to agree. If they truly meant no harm, she will let it go. They believe that she seems ready to forgive them. He tells Sienna not to hesitate to ask for anything, if only they can give it. Her expression instantly darkens. A wide, threatening smile blooms on Sienna's face as she seizes his offer. Anything, she repeats, her voice full of innuendo. A wave of horror washes over Del. He realizes his fatal mistake. She may look like a child, but she remains a villain, and panic grips his heart. What will he do if she demands their lives as payment for his fault? But her threatening appearance disappears as quickly as it appeared with a bright, almost childlike face. Sienna says she's starving to death and decides that they must treat her, leaving Adele, Kane, and Mershu stunned and speechless. With terrible clarity, he realizes what her request means. She is coming to their mansion, and in his imagination, the image of a witch descending on his home with stunning, threatening power emerges. Unaware of his inner torment, Sienna bims, whose eyes crinkled in a joyful smile. "I'm counting on you," she says, sealing their agreement. Who impatiently asked if the food was ready yet. Kane's mother, in an apron, reassured her that everything would be ready in a moment. Nearby, Kane watched with a worried face as Adele stood wrapped in gloomy sadness. The young nobleman quietly muttered to himself, grimly concluding that it was all just the art of illusions, a matter of faith. Under the full moon, Sienna, with wide shining eyes, looks up at the huge mansion and exclaims in delight that this is Adele's home, marveling at its incredible size, while Adele stands nearby, a little confused by the witch's excitement. The excitement quickly turns into a demand for delicious food, but Adele is deep in thought. She recalls that Sion's background is the image of a villain from Manhwa, a worthy opponent of the final boss, and she is overwhelmed by a sense of urgency. She must stay vigilant to prevent an immediate disaster. Finding herself in the luxurious foyer of the estate, Sienna noticed that everything inside looked very neat and not neglected at all, and Kane's mother, Mayor Shaw, smiled warmly and explained that it was all thanks to her and another maid they made sure the house was clean. She notices Adele has so much wealth that she can live in such a luxurious estate and maintain higher-ranking mini-servants, so she concludes that her status is extremely high, and Adele herself vows in her thoughts to use all the power of this noble position to please the witch. That legendary move when she leans over, as if reminding Adele, no matter how noble she has not forgotten how she ended up underwater along with the room. Sienna promised with a sharp smile to make Adele atone for it, and Adele is left speechless, realizing that a tough fight lies ahead, although a small part of her hoped to accept Sienna so well that she would forget the incident. Just then, an older man with a mustache approaches the entrance. He is greeted with "Welcome home" and called Balan. His gaze falls on Adele and Sienna, and he calmly asks if the witch is a guest. Adele explains that this man is Balan, their chief butler, and at the same time Kane's superior, and after making sure that Sienna is indeed an important guest, asks Kane to entertain her while the food is being prepared. When Balan was thanked for coming, Marasha approaches Sienna and asks if there is any food she does not like, but the witch does not give a clear answer. She turned her head to the butler Balan and, with a determined smile, ordered him to provide their guest with the best the estate could offer. Though momentarily embarrassed, Balan agreed. She was completely confident in her strategy. Combining balance, excellent service, and Mershu's famous culinary skills, she was convinced everyone would be satisfied. With this thought, she asked Sienna to wait in the next room, confident that gaining the witch's forgiveness would be very easy. But half an hour later, the plan hit an obstacle. Sienna stood with her hands on her hips, impatiently demanding to know how much longer to wait, while Adele could only offer make apology for the delay. Just then Balan appeared, bowing and sincerely apologizing for making them wait, announcing that he had returned and assuring that Mayor Shaw was already preparing food, while from the door in panic Adele shouted his name, demanding to know where he had gone. He completely ignored the master instead. He presented the witch with a huge bouquet of roses and said he brought them for Lady Sienna at the request of Master Adele. Sienna froze, staring at the flowers, completely stunned. When she asked about the gesture, Balan smiled and winked, explaining that Mrs. Adele said beautiful flowers suit a lovely lady, and since Sienna is such an honored guest, he decided to arrange a special reception. Adele looked in horror, realizing that her butler had completely misunderstood her intentions and was now creating an absurd misunderstanding. Holding the bouquet, a slight blush appeared on Sienna's cheeks, and she quietly called him a weirdo. Adele watched, noticing how the witch was clearly flustered by the unexpected gift and compliment, and Sienna herself seemed stunned that she was called an escalation. Her confusion is interrupted by Balan, who loudly demands food and warns that if the dish tastes bad, he will unleash all his fury. Just then Kane's mother, Mayor Shaw, arrives apologizing for being late and carrying dishes, while Adele quietly notices that Sini seems to have really liked the roses. She asks what the dish is, and Mayor Shaw proudly replies that it is a specially prepared meat pea her signature dish. Fragrant steam rises from the perfectly woven lattice crust. Dell felt instant disappointment. She expected something more luxurious, but quickly reminded herself that Mersh's culinary skills were genuine. When she suggests serving the witch, Sienna takes the initiative and plunges a fork into the pie to take a bite, confident that the taste will win her over despite any of her actions. The taste strikes her instantly. Her eyes open wide in surprise, and she whispers that it is soft and warm. She has never felt anything like it before. A simple, "how delicious it is," brings relief to the faces of Balan and Mayor Shaw. This reaction stunned Delsh. Had never imagined that any food could have such a rich and extraordinarily delicious taste, while Balan, observing, thinks to himself, how can she, having lived such a long life, consider this dish so tasty? Delaz's thought crystallizes into a stunning discovery. Perhaps the witch has never tasted real food in her life and has never experienced kindness, and when their eyes meet across the dinner table, a deep, silent agreement and understanding passes between them. After Sinalin ate to her heart's content and returned, full and satisfied, Adele sees that the plan to receive her worked, and the mood is wonderful, so she decides. Now is the perfect time to take advantage of their edge. He was pondering how else to entertain the guest, certain that Mersh's food and flowers had already done their job, but just as he was thinking about the next move, Mersha approached and asked Lady Sienna if she wanted to take a bath, and this unexpected offer completely caught the witch off guard. She then turned to Adele with a knowing wink before addressing Sienna again, insisting that she wash away her fatigue in the mansion's huge bath. Adele watched, stunned by Mersha's confidence. A little embarrassed by the insistence, Sienna agreed to the bath. Marisha cheerfully added that she would also cover her back. Adele, though grateful, asked Marisha if it was really okay for her to be with the witch. Mersh looked gently but firmly and told Adele that she found it hard to believe that Lady Sienna was a dangerous person, begging him to trust her. Her sincerity momentarily stunned Adele. She simply and sincerely assured that he could rely on her, and with that, they headed to the mansion's luxurious bath. Upon entering, Sienna was impressed by the room's scale. She exclaimed that she had never seen such a large bath and asked excitedly if she could swim in it. That's an idea. Mersha gladly agreed. But just as she was about to get into the water, her witchy audacity reappeared. With a flushed face, she warned Mayor Show not to pull any tricks, threatening to burn her to ashes, and the sudden threat made Mayor Show gasp in surprise. Marisha sincerely apologizes to Mistress Adele, but she just waves her hand and says it's all right. Nearby on the sofa lies unconscious Sienna, and Adele reassures Marisha that the witch was not seriously hurt and that she will take care of her, asking them to go and prepare everything necessary. When they leave, Adele is completely overwhelmed with anxiety. Everything seems incredibly fragile, and a vision of a huge explosion flashes in her mind, a terrible image of what could happen if Sienna wakes up in a bad mood. While they nervously fuss trying to sort out this mess, Sienna on the sofa begins to stir, her eyes slowly open. She quietly asks where she is, and Adele, watching her, calls her by name, her voice mixed with worry and relief. Sienna gets up, and Adele quickly explains that she slipped in the bath and fell, asking if she remembers what happened. Adele sees with relief that Sienna is not angry. It seems she remembers the event only vaguely. Later, resting in a luxurious room after changing clothes, Sienna was bursting with curiosity. She asked Adele if the parents were here, because she had not seen them yet, and this sudden question completely caught Adele off guard. They say the parents are away on business. Their estates are small, and they are less influential than other lords, so business often takes them to foreign lands, and Adele quietly wonders to herself what prompted Sienna to suddenly be so interested. It seems she understands, then she explains why she thinks so. For now, she considers Mayor Sean Ballon her parents. Adele is stunned by his silence. They ask how Sienna could say such a thing if they are not related and of a completely different race. Adele, trying to comprehend Sienna's confession, says that she does not fully understand herself yet, but suggests, perhaps blood is not as important as how people treat each other. Their words seem to resonate with Sienna, and she quietly. After the service, the servant announces that their rooms are ready, and Adele, deciding to let Sienna rest, is about to leave, but suddenly someone's hand grabs her by the sleeve and makes her stop. They turn around and see that Sienna is already in bed, looking at them with hope. She asks if they can sleep together because she still wants to talk. Adele stares, is completely stunned. The request was so shocking that Adele finds herself in bed next to Sienna, eyes wide open and internally screaming in disbelief. They lie motionless next to the now sleeping witch Adele, and their mind races wildly. They panic, trying to understand how everything could have escalated to this, whether Sienna even realizes the consequences, and only the thought of Mersha's reaction overwhelms them with a sense of inevitable threat, as if they will never wake up again. Suddenly, Sienna mumbles something in her sleep. Frightened, Adele lets out a quiet scream and instinctively responds, stammering, "Well, yes." She quiets down and listens as Sienna, as if still asleep, begins to talk about the servant Mersha, asks what illness she had and immediately answers herself. Mana illness, a condition where the body accumulates too much mana. Sienna explains, if mana is not released regularly, it accumulates, becomes poisonous, and the body rots from the inside. That is why in the dungeon she performed simple water spells daily, and Adele now understands everything. While listening, Adele wonders why Sienna is so interested in Marisha and suspects that the maid might have whispered something to her in the bath. Sienna's monologue continues, her thoughts drifting to how she, without realizing it, found herself sealed in that very dungeon. She wonders, strange, but she knew exactly what she had to do. Adele, listening from the side, silently guesses probably this is the backstory programmed into the game. Sienna's thoughts dive deeper into the past. Everyone who removed her seal did so out of fear of her power and immediately kept the necessary distance. Simple things, sleeping next to someone or eating with someone, were unattainable for her, and without exception, having used her, they sealed her again, a simple, painfully repetitive cycle. She thought that this time everything would be the same, but the maid Shah treated her as if she were her own daughter. Sienna, who was always despised and feared as a monster, knew her duty was to give her power to the one who removed her seal. But such kindness was completely new to her. Adele watches. Her face changes from this revelation. Looking at the nightgown lying on her chest, she realized, for the first time in the 1,000 years she had lived, someone had treated her like this. A deep, unfamiliar feeling stirred within her, and she quietly wondered what this feeling was. These words echoed in Adele's head. Lying awake, she painfully realized this harsh reality. Sienna was completely alone in that dungeon. They simply never tried to understand her. To them, she was just a weapon, a tool to be released as soon as her seal was removed. After such an existence suddenly receiving care, as if being perceived as a person, as if as a daughter, Adele understood that Sienna must be deeply confused. She could not help but wonder what feelings the witch experienced during her long imprisonment. Adele's thoughts fled to Sienna's present life. She was among books and knowledge, but the question did not disappear. What did she feel, sitting alone for centuries in that windowless underground chamber, just waiting for her release? A quiet sound from the bed snapped Adele out of her reverie. Sienna woke up, a slight smile playing on her face. Embarrassed, Adele sat up and asked what was so funny. Adele quickly asked if Sienna was mocking her, but the witch denied it and apologized. Instead, Sienna turned the question around and asked what Adele felt when Mersho said he considered her a daughter. While Sienna's cheeks blushed, her own words caught her by surprise, and Adele was momentarily speechless. To allow Adele to answer, Sienna's hand clenched the sheets. She quickly withdrew her question and insisted that it did not matter. I am a witch, she stammered, her voice filled with self-hatred, and a monster. She continued and said to Adele, only you yourself can decide what you feel. If it makes you even a little happier, the next day tell Mayor Shaw about it. Thoughts pressed on her, and hiding her eyes behind her hair, she quietly asked herself if she really had the right to decide such things alone. In a moment, lying next to each other in bed, a quiet sound of realization escaped from their lips. Next to her, Adele thought that everything ended peacefully and that she managed to avoid danger for the night, but caution did not let go, so she decided not to sleep until morning just in case. But the child's body drowsiness was too strong to resist. Adele suddenly woke up with a frightened gasp and, shivering, realized that despite all intentions to stay alert, sleep had taken her. Adele suddenly felt horror. Sienna could have gone to Marisha. The place next to her was empty, and panic-overwhelmed Hirsch had to find Sienna immediately. Throwing off the blankets, Adele rushed out of the room and called Mayor Shaw. In the neighboring room, she did not encounter a crisis but a quiet, peaceful scene. Mayor Shaw, now dressed as a maid, wished her good morning, and Sienna, exquisitely tired, simply noted that Adele had finally left. He is still trying to comprehend the scene. Listening as Sienna cheerfully explains that dear Sia invited her to breakfast, Mersha immediately offers to prepare food for him, and he just stands stunned. When Mershada leaves, his head spins from confusion. Darling Gaisayathi had breakfast together, and he cannot understand what happened. Deanna returns to him. Her voice cuts through his confusion. She reminds him of his own words from yesterday that she must decide for herself, and after a minute of thought with a radiant smile, she announces her decision. She will also live in this house with her. The butler who appeared nearby immediately became concerned and asked Mr. Adele if it was wise to allow such a dangerous person to make such an important decision. Embarrassed, Adele explained that he only meant Sienna herself must decide what she feels toward others. He counters Adele's argument, saying that dangerous is someone who casts a powerful spell at the first meeting, and to Adele's complete surprise, the butler sincerely says he is proud and pleased with such a result. When he announces that breakfast is ready for everyone, Adele sinks down, exhausted, and thinks, did he somehow succeed or did he fail spectacularly? Adele stands by the large, sunlit window with a cup of tea, looking at the quiet landscape outside the window. Calm descends around, and they ponder how silent it is here. This shift is a real relief. Adele thinks that Kane and Sia, once their greatest worries, have now become allies, and events proceed without major conflicts, so they decide to enjoy this quiet moment while it lasts. The quiet moment suddenly breaks. The Witch of Misfortunes bursts in, laughing loudly, calls Adele, and announces big news. The two of them are heading to the deepest level of the dungeon in the Western Forest, and Adele is completely bewildered. Instantly everything turns into pure, unadulterated horror. In Adele's head echoes a silent, desperate no. This internal refusal turns into open protest. Adele stubbornly sits on the floor. The Witch of Misfortunes is surprised by her behavior and asks if she is a spoiled child. The witch says that the water and the dungeon should have already retreated, and she wants to take her things from the deepest floor. But Adele is unyielding. They will not go to the dungeon under any circumstances. He insists on this, reminding Adele of their previous dungeon trips, and she firmly replies that those were only visits to the first floor. It is relatively safe there. Monsters do not even appear, and the thought of numerous clashes with them on the deepest floor is too dangerous. Irritation grows, and Adele stands up to confront the witch directly. She admits that her presence could change the course of events, but insists that she is terribly underestimated. She is truly very weak, and with a face full of despair, begs for at least a breath of air. They continued to refuse, explaining the grim reality of their situation. Realizing they had reincarnated, they immediately checked their personal stats and stumbled upon a terrible truth. Although they had an affinity for all magical elements, they had no magic points at all, and the growth rate was a miserable 0.1, so they were effectively powerless. This meant that due to their natural weakness, all attempts to train and level up were almost futile. The growth rate was catastrophically low, so progress was practically impossible. With such terrible stats, even the simplest spells, which an ordinary person would learn in a couple of weeks, would require years of work from them. They remember this all too well. Adele's character in that game they once played was initially designed with a backstory that directly led to death and destruction. In despair, they explained that the creators of this world burdened them with an exhausting curse, a negative effect debuff that makes the challenge of disasters almost inevitable, and they were sure that even the weakest monsters here could easily take their lives. They call themselves a pathetic noble in every sense of the word, someone who would be doomed to die if they dared to descend to the deepest level of the dungeon. The Witch of Misfortune watches this spectacle. Slightly smiling, she notes with surprise, how do they dare to humiliate themselves with such pride? She continues to explain that this is a real mess. She asked others for help, but everyone said they were busy. Hearing this, Adele was breathless. A terrible thought occurred to her. So she concludes Adele is the only one who can escort her. She grabs them and starts pulling away, but Adele clings and shouts for her to go alone, because she is sure they will perish, and suddenly a flash of memory reveals the culprit. Balon set them up, telling the witch he needed a luggage cart. He found himself on the second underground level of the Northern Forest dungeon, completely confused. No monsters were visible anywhere, but the witch was evil. Apparently expecting exactly this, she explains that all the monsters were destroyed by someone named Mersha using water spells, and reassures him that everything will be fine. She says that the water has receded, and after some time the monsters will be reborn, having fed on mana inside the dungeon. A blush slowly spread across Adele's face as he realized that his passionate protests were in vain. Their journey leads to Sia's room. Everything is in complete disorder, books, staffs, and shards scattered on the floor, and Adele can only freeze, staring at this stunning chaos. She deliberately asks who is to blame for this mess, and he apologizes embarrassedly. She laughed, saying it was just a joke, and suggests looking for something useful, including clothes for her. Sorting through the remains, she sighs and decides that the books can no longer be saved. He examines the large collection of staffs and wonders why she needs so many. Meanwhile, the witches find her clothes in the wardrobe. With relief, the water did not touch them. He picks up one of the staffs, and she, smiling, explains that it is a magical item. This staff enhances the water magic of whoever wields it, and allows anyone with a talent for water magic to cast basic spells. Hope is instantly undermined by the memory of his condition 0 affinity for all elements, even water, and no mana. But gripping the staff tightly, another thought crosses his mind. Might wielding this item still allow him to cast magic despite his limitations? In the ruined room, the Witch of Misfortunes, now with short blonde hair, examines her reflection in a cracked mirror and tries on a simple white dress, noticing with a shy blush that she sits without any problems. Turning away from the mirror, she cheerfully asks Adele to say how she looks in this elegant dress. Then curiosity appears on her face. She feels something and whispers, "Water." In response, Adele raises the magical staff high. A deep concentration freezes on his face. He growls a spell and summons a water sphere that rushes at the enemy, leaving the witch completely bewildered. His staff releases a powerful stream of water that strikes the witch and instantly soaks her new dress. Adele lets out a frightened scream as the spell manifests with unexpected force. He froze in complete disbelief. A surge of awe washing over him from within it was incredible. He had truly cast a spell. He had never imagined he could use magic, especially without any training. Overwhelmed with excitement, he lunged forward and grabbed the witch by the shoulders, making her shudder, desperately begging, calling her Sia and asking her to give it to him. Soaked and irritated, she throws a fierce look at Del, thinking to herself that such power really suits her thing, but she realizes this is a completely different level. A light blush appears on her cheeks, and she admits that she never knew about the existence of such an incredible thing. She yields and tells Adele that since he insists so much, he can keep the staff. She inadvertently shows the ring on her finger and explains that it is a magical item that enhances healing magic. Delighted, Adele thanks her, calls her Sia, and in his thoughts decides that although he is still weak, he has a way to quickly rise and finally get rid of the reputation of a pathetic nobody. In a few weeks his plan begins to work. He proudly stands at the entrance to the dungeon, staff in hand, and announces that he has successfully flooded the entire second floor. Sienna, as planned, feigns surprise recalls how she previously told him that the powerful water spells of Mercy wiped out all the monsters in the dungeon, and Adele only smiles slyly in response. This reveals his train of thought. It was this that pushed him to the idea. By flooding the underground floors, he could destroy the monsters en masse and gain a lot of experience. With his current magical abilities, the task was difficult and took several weeks. Exhausted, he said that was enough for today, and then realized the next step was to ask Xia to revive the monsters that had previously died, right in the water. He shines with delight now. He can endlessly farm experience points without risking anything. Sienna praises him, saying his creativity is amazing and his persistence incredible. Rosie Adele credits her, saying it's all thanks to her help. From a direct compliment she stammers confusedly. Supposedly, compliments will do him no good, and just at that moment, a huge monster's leg emerges from the water right behind her. She shuddered as a terrible dark-furred wolf crawled out of the flooded corridor, dripping water. Adele froze, not believing her eyes, realizing that the creature had broken his barrier, and he muttered that he probably lasted 2 weeks. He strides forward decisively and stands between Sienna and the beast. Sienna shouts his name, shocked by his sudden courage, and quietly realizes that this is a power born of despair, so she resigns herself to what has happened. Her hand suddenly shot forward and grabbed his shoulder to stop him. She demanded to know if he really planned to fight alone, reminding him that not long ago he proudly boasted of his weakness, and pointed out that she had been helping him for several days and that he had already gained a good amount of experience points. He ignores her pleas, eyes wide open and alert as the monster charges. Convinced that he has become wiser, he begins to cast a spell, calls water to heat up his invocation and turn it into a ball that will strike the enemy. With a final shout, he releases the spell Water Ball. A powerful projectile of pure water hits the wolf and forcefully knocks it back. Creature falls defeated, and Adele raises his staff in triumph. He turns to Sienna and with a joyful exclamation, asks her to look if she saw how much stronger he has become, and Sienna looks a bit embarrassed and quietly admits that it seems so. The celebration continues. He sincerely thanks Sienna, pointing to his status and explaining that it was thanks to her that his water magic MP, which was 0, has now increased, and Sienna turns away, blushing slightly and waving off his praise, saying that he is making a big fuss over 1 kill. She watched as Adele, excited by his recent success, got lost in thought. He thought that if he continued to level up his stats so quickly, he might really have a chance against those villains whose actions had doomed him to death. The triumphant mood carried them all back to the attraction, and he, smiling widely and happily, announced their return. When they arrived, King met them at the entrance. Greeting Master Adele on his return home, he apologized for the untimely meeting and said that a guest from the neighboring territory had arrived. This news instantly spoiled Adele's mood, because he was just thinking about how to avoid his next doom flat. He asked if the guest was really from the neighboring lands, and Kane confirmed it. Kane explained that Sir Balon was currently receiving them, but the guest insisted on personally greeting Adele, and anxiety slowly crept into his mind. His mind raced as he demanded to know who it was. He panicked inside, thinking that only villains were around who could cause doomflax, and with horror realized that the next big event he had expected much later was coming much sooner. He looked up and saw a young woman with long light hair. She smiled pleasantly and introduced herself as Freya Raskart. This name hit Adele like a physical blow, and he recognized her immediately. She was the explosive Saint Freya, the same one who in that story he knew once destroyed an entire town. Del Rydlick says simply and clearly, they are a reincarnator. This was called a moment of insight. This world is the world of a game called Artel's Miracle. Reborn as the heir of a local lord, their fate seemed grim. Their domain, resembling an attraction, was doomed to destruction by one of the game's villains. Only 9 years remained before the main story began, and although they had known strengths, they felt powerless before the inevitable demise. Relying on his grim future, they made a plan. With a determined smile, they decided to lure to their side all the villains threatening Rydlik, to kill two birds with one stone, reduce the number of death flags, and simultaneously befriend powerful figures. Their efforts finally bore fruit. After a long struggle, they managed to befriend Cain the demon who was with Sienna, just as a wave of relief washed over them, and they thought the two major obstacles were behind them. Suddenly, a new harbinger of trouble appeared. The source of this new threat stands before them at the threshold. A young woman with long, freely flowing hair calls herself Friariskar and politely greets death. This name suddenly threw Dell into a panic. A question arose in the mind: why would the explosive scent, Freya, come to them, since they remember that this character was supposed to appear much later during the game, and they definitely do not consider the title Explosive Scent official. The title Saint is not just a word. It is given only to those chosen by a powerful religious organization known as the Cathedral. She stands before them, a figure of incredible power, and a terrible thought grows in Adele's mind. Did her attempts to befriend Cain and Je cause some forced plot correction? In the original chronicle, Saint Freya destroyed entire cities, causing disaster, and Adele fears that this premature appearance is a sign of the inevitable destruction of their territory. Saint turns with a gentle smile, directly addresses them, and asks if they are Suradale. Adele, stunned, barely manages to whisper yes, and Freya smiles and says that it is an honor for her to finally meet. They stumble, saying that the honor is theirs too, sincerely grateful for her visit. The butler steps forward and informs Lady Adele that a room has already been prepared for the guest. Resigned to the situation, Adele thanks him, understanding that they have no choice. They will have to accept this powerful guest. They watch as the butler leads their guest to the living room. Freya gently thanks Adele for the hospitality, ignoring possible inconveniences from her sudden visit. While the maid serves tea, Adele's thoughts are far away. Everyone wants one thing: for her to leave as soon as possible, and they stand ready to prevent her from destroying the estate. Adele looks at her and thinks, she seems just an ordinary sweet girl, and that is frightening. How could this person go mad and destroy entire cities? A drop of sweat slowly runs down Adele's cheek as she contemplates this chilling contradiction. In the imagination appears the image of a saint with a maniacal smile, delighting in destruction. Adele concludes that beneath her innocent facade hides some extreme, cruel impulses. In reality, everything is much calmer. Freya is simply savoring tea and says it is pleasant, but in Adele's terrible perception, behind the saint's gentle smile grows a terrible, fierce face, and they understand that they must carefully watch every detail when communicating with her. Their minds were wildly swarming with new anxieties. Holding a cup of tea, the Witch of Misfortune Sia called Cain's mother, Mare Shah. She immediately demanded to know if her tea was made with a lot of milk and sugar. Adele observed and thought that the witch's frank arrogance would almost certainly irritate the other guests. The thought of a fight between two such powerful villains sent a chill down their spine. They could not ask CA to leave right now. If a clash started, their tiny corner would be completely destroyed, so they could only hope that Freya had a long patience. Gathering courage, they decided to find a reason for the witch to leave. Making a calm appearance, Adele turned to Sia and asked what had brought her here today. But it was not Sia who answered. From the sofa spoke Freya Raskard, the explosive saint. She explained that her duties had brought her near their lands, so she decided to pay homage. Adele thought about this and felt it was very strange. The saint had never before bothered to come, and appearing right now at such a strange time and without prior notice was extremely unusual. They had not yet had time to consider this. See you, suddenly addressed the saint directly. Hey, you said her name was Freya. She spoke with a serious expression. Did you bring any gifts to the show? The witch began to explain her train of thought. Isn't it customary in the human world to bring treats when visiting? Her eyes sparkled because she remembered incredibly tasty sweets that a previous guest had once brought, and saliva ran from her mouth. Suddenly Adele understood everything. Sia behaved so rudely to Freya only because of hunger. Embarrassed, Adele quickly tried to smooth the situation, apologizing and insisting that Freya should not pay attention to the witch who was just babbling nonsense. Adele tries to restrain Sia, who is rushing to the offered sweet treat, but in haste he stumbled and exclaimed. Sia dashed forward, and Adele fell to the ground with a painful scream. The fall pushed him right onto Freya, pressing her to the bed. Their faces were only a few inches apart. Out of shame, he stammered the most sincere apologies, and wide-eyed Sia just stared. He continuously apologizes, convinced that he deeply offended the revered saint. Although Freya says not to worry, her cheeks are burning with a blush, and he mistakenly interprets this as hidden anger. He was still frozen in that awkward pose. He decides that he can no longer afford to make mistakes and will never make a mistake again. The tense moment is interrupted by Ja, who notices that this situation reminded her of something she had long been thinking about. She looks at the flushed Freya and sincerely asks what saints are. The question shocks Adelesh, freezes in disbelief, looking at the deep ignorance of her companions. Settling on the couch, he reads Zha's lectures. How could she not know that the title of saint deserves deep respect, accusing her as if she only asked to provoke Freya, and Zha just chews candy and quietly says, I understand. He returned to Freya, bowed his head again, apologizing that C was not very knowledgeable about worldly matters. When C asked what that meant, Freya just laughed and assured them both that it did not bother her at all. Freya begins to explain, clarifying that saint is a title given only to those approved by the council. She describes them as a religious sect devoted to God, making all sorts of contributions to maintain peace in the world. Del, hearing this, says excitedly that she did not know about such an organization, quickly adds that Freya was chosen as a saint and quietly sighs with relief to herself, glad that her companion's ignorance offended no one. When Adele tries to smooth the situation, Zha intervenes her face serious. She suggests that the saints use not only healing magic, but also light magic, and concludes that Freya's purpose is to walk the world and soothe others' pain. Direct mention of magic causes Adele to have a panic attack. Fears they have finally angered the saint, while Freya meanwhile remains sitting with an impassive face. Without hesitation, Freya confidently explains that she is still studying to become a true saint and travels through various lands to deepen her knowledge, while meanwhile Adele feverishly searches for the right words to save the situation. Her thoughts suddenly break off. She falls completely silent. Adele turns to the witch and asks her for a moment. Suddenly it dawns on her. As soon as magic was mentioned, Zha's face immediately turned to stone. Just as she managed to inquire further, there was a knock at the door and a maid entered, asked for permission, addressed Adelia, and conveyed a proposal from Mr. Balon. Since it was already quite late, Lady Freya must stay overnight. This news caught Adelia by surprise. When they heard this news, Adele panicked, looking for any excuse for Freya to leave. They insist that Lady Freya must be insanely busy with her duties as a saint, and maybe it's time for her to return home. Everyone fears that tomorrow they will again have to behave carefully around this explosive saint, and Freya simply asks if she can stay. They try to spectacularly lead the guest to failure, and Freya and Sia, completely ignoring Adele's protests, admiringly admire the path to the bath. Freya happily says that it is so spacious there that you can swim, and Sia exclaims that she can't wait, while the frightened Adele yells at them for so lightly increasing the difficulty of the situation. They stand stunned, and then Balanced appears. He addresses Master Adele, then turns his attention to their guest and offers to show Lady Frey from the path. Adele freezes without words and cannot intervene. Then he turns to Sia and asks if she would like to spend the night in the same chambers. The question momentarily confuses Sia, but panic rises in Adele. Off-screen, Adele collapses and bursts out decisively, no, demanding separate rooms be prepared. Later in the luxurious bath, he immerses himself in warm water and sighs contentedly. Freya also begins to relax, pressing the towel to her chest and enjoying. Her thoughts drift to their master, Sir Adele. She wonders who Adele really is and comes to the conclusion, whatever happens, she has no choice, she must cling to that one and only truth about him. Adele stands in the corridor, face tense and serious. They address an invisible person and decisively ask if their instructions have been carried out. He clarified with Sia whether she appreciated saint status, recalling how Frey's face turned pale when he previously mentioned magic. Sia cheerfully confirmed yes, showing the okay gesture. He then asked what she hoped to achieve, explaining that he asked her to conduct an assessment because he felt there was a reason behind her behavior. Sia admits that something about this situation worries her, which unexpectedly surprised Deli. She announces Freya's status, light and healing 0, darkness 3 magic points. She also has a skill called derangement and the title favorite of the evil god, and Adele is stunned, not understanding how this can be since Freya's religious order does not worship such pacts. He remembers that in Gaming New, there really was a sect dedicated to a sinister god, but the inconsistencies trouble him. Freya has no light or healing magic at all. She is extremely gifted in dark magic and can create explosions without any skills and without fire magic. Returning to Sia for answers, he anxiously asks if there is dark magic capable of causing explosions, and this is even stranger, because the title of saint is usually given only to those who have mastered light and healing magic to a certain level. At first she says no. As far as she knows, Freya cannot create explosions without fire magic, but a moment later she corrects herself, admitting that this is not entirely true, and this only fuels Adele's curiosity. Zia clarifies a rare exception. If someone's attribute falls into the negative, and there are no magic points at all, but they still try to forcibly cast a spell from that attribute, it ends with a powerful explosion. The consequence of this new information puts everyone in a Del stop. He asks Sia if it is even possible for an attribute to be negative. Sia sincerely admits that she herself has never encountered this and cannot say for sure, she only heard about it from others. His mind races, piecing together these strange anomalies. In all the games he knew, there was never a negative characteristic and magic points always decreased upon use. so he could not understand her repeated explosions. They happened even though she had no fire talent, and he could not understand how she was given the title of saint if her light and healing points were zero. And above all loomed the ominous presence of an evil god. He understands that even Freya herself probably feels her situation is abnormal. Believing that all this is connected to her explosive power, he concludes that he must talk to her about it. The next day he leads Freya to the desolate outskirts of a place known as the Land of Death. Embarrassed, she surveys the desert landscape and asks why he brought her so far from the city. He explains that this place is called the Land of Death, a place where people almost never go. Freya looks around the gloomy surroundings and agrees. It really does seem completely abandoned here. He turned to her, as if confirming that the loneliness of this place was the reason for his choice. Here, everything she tells him will remain between them, and no one else will hear it. He watched her closely. She lowered her gaze and sank into thought. To himself, he realized how keenly she noticed everything. As expected, she saw right through him and broke the silence. Freya raised her eyes, looking seriously, and asked if something was bothering him. Before he could understand her question, Freya's composure crumbled. Her face flushed with emotion. She pressed her hand to her chest. Her voice suddenly filled with despair. She begged Sir Adele for help, shouting that he was now the only person she could rely on. Adele recalled her explanation for traveling was simple, a desire to deepen knowledge, but from the very beginning Adele felt that something was wrong. This feeling grew stronger due to several inconsistencies. Freya's visit was sudden and without any warnings. As soon as magic was mentioned, her face turned pale, but the scariest thing, her status was unnatural. Magic points for light, darkness, and healing were all zero, and she had a strange condition called skilled arrange-you. The first suspicions only grew stronger from the memory of Sia, the Witch of Misfortune. She once warned that if a person with zero magical glasses in some attribute tries to forcibly cast a spell, it could lead to a powerful explosion, and she also categorically said that no one who cannot use healing and light magic can ever be chosen as same. This explanation became the key. Adele realized that it could be the cause of Freya's destructive outbursts in the game world, gathered all the pieces together, and decided to tackle the problem directly. To ask Freya if something was pressing on her thoughts, and declared that she must know the reason, even if it meant risking. In the desolate landscape, Freya froze in surprise at this question and asked again what Delmet was. Then understanding flashed on her face and she quietly asked if Adele wanted to help her. Her calm finally broke. With a worried look, Freya admitted that a few months ago she suddenly could not use magic at all. She explained that when she first received the title of saint, she used both healing and light magic without problems, and listening with crossed arms, Adele only confirmed her suspicion. Freya's dilemma, as suspected, was entirely connected to her magic. She listens as Freya continues her story, explaining that she tried to learn magic from scratch and reread countless books, even all to no avail, pretended to be sick for some time, but her duties as a saint did not allow her to hide her condition from the cathedral, and it was then she heard rumors about him. She recounts in detail the rumors she heard, but the heir of Ridlick suddenly learned to create magic, and it is this barely noticeable hope, which she admits to, that brought her here seeking salvation for her own life. These words struck him with a sudden, awakening horror. Now he understands why they came to their territory, but this realization brings only fear. He sees her condition as another fatal sign of the disaster that has arisen right before him, a tangible threat. He shudders inside from this revelation, realizing that his efforts have shockingly turned against him. Unaware of his turmoil, Freya persistently continues, asking by what method he gained his abilities and begging him to teach her. After a brief moment of hesitation, he admits, his ability is not innate. The only reason he can create magic without natural talent is that he was given a special divisa, and saying this, he displays a small ring on his palm, a tool that grants tiny water magic and has a tragically low growth rate. He recalls S's words when she handed him the ring, calling it a simple magical tool. He clenches his fist and thinks what a loss it would be to give it away, but suddenly another thought arises. If Freya wore this ring, she would almost certainly restore the ability to use healing magic. The internal conflict intensifies. He knows this ring is extremely rare, and he will never get another like it. Giving it to Freya would mean sacrificing his own chance to someday master healing magic, and it also feels like a betrayal of CSG. He froze in place, struggling inside, not knowing what to do. Freya, noticing his confusion, apologizes for putting him in an awkward position, and sincerely promises to keep secret the way he learned magic. His mind races from one possibility to another. He understands that if he refuses, Freya might become unpredictable. He cannot see how to refuse without revealing the existence of the ring. While he hesitates, Freya's despair grows. Tears gather in her eyes. She begs him to say yes and promises to do anything for him in return. Her plea hung in the air. He thinks that if this continues, he will lose the very reason to live in this world. With a heavy sigh, he gives in and says he understands. When Freya heard his agreement, her face lit up with disbelief, and he quickly explained that he cannot guarantee she will be able to use magic as he does, but assured her he has a plan. He explains his train of thought, says that having Freya in debt is not bad for him at all, and she, overwhelmed with emotions, sincerely and generously thanks him. The matter is settled. They stand in the middle of a rocky clearing. Adele announces the first part of his plan. He will give her a magical eye. He opens his palm. In it is a small ring with a dark stone. Freya froze and asked if it was really a magical item. He confirms and explains that the thing enhances magical abilities simply by wearing it, and Freya immediately protests, insisting she cannot accept such a valuable item. He smiles and insists that the price of the ring does not matter if it allows her to learn magic. He adds that the ring also helps him remove the flag of death, and Freya is completely embarrassed by this. Her cheeks burn. She stammers and gets tangled in words. She shyly asks if she can wear the ring on any finger she chooses. Adele answers yes, asks for her hand, and she hesitantly agrees. She shyly extends her left hand. He takes her hand and begins to put the ring on her ring finger. He freezes. A confused note fleetingly crosses his face. Of all the fingers she could have extended, he wonders why she offered the ring finger on her left hand. She gazes at the ring, her cheeks burning with joy, and says she will cherish it like a treasure. Her words confuse him, realizes that because she is holy, this is probably the first ring she has ever received from him. A warm smile blossomed on his face. He agrees and tells her that he would be grateful if she did it. Then he sincerely adds that he really wants her to do it. He explains to Lady Freya that although the ring's action is simple, he must now allow her to use magic, and wonders if she is listening because she is admiring the ring on her hand. He continues, saying that he wants her to cast healing magic. Without looking back and with surprise, he adds that there is no one injured here. He acknowledges her argument and suddenly, with fierce determination, pulls out a large knife from his side, loudly declaring that he intends to use it. Freya watches, and her face freezes in shock. She screams in fear and begs him to stop, but he coldly asks her to step back, explaining that what he is about to do will be dangerous. His face turned to stone, said that if there were no wounded, they would just create one. Without saying a word, he plunged the tip of the knife straight into his hand, and Freya froze in shock. Blood flows from his hand, and Freya asks why he so foolishly wounded himself. He looks up at her as if the wound is nothing and calmly orders her to cast a healing spell on him, reminding her of her new power. But her gaze jumps from her hand to his, which is bleeding. This place brings a wave of fear and doubt, recalling memories of past defeats and the suffering faces of others. This thought paralyzes her. What if she fails again? She froze, bowing her head in despair. Adele, kneeling beside her, gently pressed the soft side of her hand to her shoulder. He leaned closer, his face showing unwavering faith, assured her that everything would be fine, and earnestly urged her to believe in herself and knew she could. His words, "everything will be fine," echoed in her head, and a blush spread across her cheeks. Accepting his encouragement, she was overwhelmed by a strange feeling. She raised her hands, apologized to him, and said that now she felt she could, and with new determination agreed to try. A wave of warmth and determination washed over her, and her face flushed with emotion. Thoughts raced through her mind. The spot on her shoulder where Adele had touched burned with warmth. She began to pray and ask the goddess to bless the one standing before her, and a strong desire to calm him and repay his kindness ignited in her heart. "You will buy this desire to repay his kindness." She stretched out her hands and shouted a single command. To the leg, in the air appeared a shining, exquisite magical circle bathing Adele's wounded arm in its glow. She looked at her hands in amazement, the smoldering light of her successful spell fading around. Magic at work. Del examined his fully healed arm, and with relief realized that Freya really could perform magic again. He looked at the ground where his blood still was, and a tear of gratitude welled up in his eyes because his faith in her had been rewarded. Overwhelmed by this success, Freya burst into tears of pure joy. Her cheeks burned, she sincerely thanked him, her voice trembled with emotion, and she insisted that she could never thank him enough. He modestly brushed off her thanks and replied that it was nothing, and that he was also glad he could have it. His humility only deepened her admiration. She recalled his nobility, how he not only gave a valuable thing, but consciously wounded himself for her. The name Suradal echoed in her thoughts with new respect. While Freya watched, Adele gave a magical smile and a playful peace sign. Freya was completely enchanted, her cheek blushed, and she thought to herself how truly wonderful he was. His magical mask suddenly crumbled. A wave of belated shock overwhelmed him as the reality of the just experienced danger dawned on him, and he realized with horror that he had thought himself doomed. Behind him, Freya blissfully suspected nothing and was still immersed in her admiration. He considered the situation with relief. At least Freya would not cause an explosion with healing magic. Why her power had fallen was still a mystery, but the urgent problem was solved, and he winced in pain, realizing he had cut himself deeper than necessary, recalling how he had literally had to push her to cast the spell. He knew it was for his survival, but he was no longer willing to endure such pain. Shifting his gaze to Lady Freya, he realized, although the immediate crisis was averted, the real threat remains. Her light magic could explode at any moment, so he has not yet fully escaped this dangerous pitfall. She turns to him, a question in her eyes. He explains that if she continues to practice healing spells while wearing the ring, her magical abilities will gradually become stronger. Freya repeats his words, keep reading the spells. Seeking clarification, he confirms repetition really is the key. To himself, he decides that it's time to end the session and send her home, but Freya seems to be piecing together a puzzle, and aloud wonders what it will mean when she returns to the cathedral. Her face reddened as she reached a stunning conclusion, and she asked if he intended to personally help her in training, cutting herself again and again until her abilities became sufficient and she herself seemed embarrassed by her words. She awkwardly clenches her hands and cannot believe he would be willing to endure such pain for her, shocks Adel instantly and loudly denies that he would have such an intention. She, noticeably disappointed, turns away from him. He stammers, raises his hands in a defensive gesture, and cannot find the right words to dispel the misunderstanding. He froze in surprise. Freya, with a flushed face and just a few centimeters from him, solemnly makes a vow. She calls herself Freya Raskard and swears not to waste his care, to follow his advice again and again until her mana is completely exhausted. Her tension only grows as she extends a knife to him. Her eyes shine with anxious tenderness. She insists that he take it, even offering to cut him herself if he wishes. Adele, who was a guest, can only recoil in protest. The chaotic scene reaches its climax, a desperate shout of "break," then a scream and the sound of a blade piercing something, and Freya cheerfully says she will continue. Later, the intense training finally subsides, and a luxurious carriage stands by the estate gates for Freya. As she prepares to leave, Freya sincerely thanks Adele for his help. He, completely exhausted and leaning on his butler, barely waved off and secretly sighed with relief. Finally, it was all over. At the very exit, she looks back, a memory surfaced. She admits that her inability to use magic began around the same time. She met a certain, unnamed person. He inquires about this person. Freya explains that she was acquainted with the chief priest, but for the rest of the clergy a stranger, so only vague memories remain of her. This information settles in Adele's mind, and he understands that Freya suspects this mysterious figure is connected to her magical affliction. He reflects on recent events, grateful for the valuable information. Now that Freya knows how to use magic, he believes she will no longer have reason to come and can finally find peace, but doubts about the cathedral's role in his possible downfall do not fade, so he decides to remain vigilant. When he finished his thought, he froze near her carriage. She called him by name. He turned around, responding to her call. She, with a blush on her cheeks and hope in her eyes, shyly asks if she will be allowed to come to him again, and this unexpected question leaves Adele and his companions completely speechless. The question hangs in the air for only a moment, and Balan, clenching his fist from excitement, loudly exclaims that she is, of course, welcome. Freya clasps her hands in joy, barely believing this answer, and Adele is frozen in shock. As her carriage begins to depart, Balan warmly encourages her to come anytime. Freya waves back with a bright smile and promises that she will. Promise echoes in Adele's mind. He tries to comprehend this turn of events and cannot believe that she will want to visit him again, especially after Balan gave her a ring, and in the background, Balan beams with self-satisfaction. His head spins. A terrible, exaggerated vision of the saint arises. He imagines her return, a man beside her, a smile on her face, and she asks to cut him even deeper for his blood, and just the thought that this saint might come again fills him with pure horror. He instantly fainted, his legs flew up and he fell backward. Valen shouted his name in fright, and Freya anxiously asked if he was all right. The stress from that encounter was so strong that he slept for a whole week. Along the eastern trail, a small group descends a rocky path, and lagging behind Adele and Freya, the Witch of Misfortunes patiently asks if they are already at the place. While looking tired, he replies that it is a little further, but this does not calm the witch at all. She bursts out in irritation, grumbling that Adele has been saying this for some time, and demands a more precise answer. Her outburst provokes a sharp reprimand from Freya. She sharply scolds the witch and calls her an impatient child. Adele intervenes and firmly says that when he says a little more, he means exactly that, and she should trust him. Suddenly her face lit up. She pointed forward and joyfully told the other two that she now saw the place. Our goal is very close. In the distance, on a forcibly cleared glade, a small hamlet of wooden houses was hidden. This was their goal, a hidden refuge of a bandit group. The decision to take on this mission appeared a few days ago. Then Adele decided to head east, quietly pondering the plan that awaited ahead. Now sitting in a local establishment, the group discusses their goal. Freya asks to confirm if they are on the border of Rayleigh, and Adele confirms, explaining that this territory is weak and has no strength to defend itself after a recent conflict in the surrounding lands, so only their group can do something. He is covered in cold sweat when Freyam says with a sinister smile. She hints that the recent incident with the explosive scent could have been a regular event that might happen again. Gathering his courage, he proclaims that merely preparing for the events he remembers from his past life is not enough. First, they need to strengthen their military power and learn to respond flexibly to any situation, and let this be the first day. While they discuss this over tea, Freya questions the logic. What does the march east have to do with his plan, since hiring a regular army will cost a fortune and only irritate the neighboring nobles? He points with his finger at the map and clearly says his target is a gang of robbers. He explains that he received intelligence. A band of thieves is hiding just beyond the eastern highway. But in reality, his goal is to convince them to become mercenaries under his command. From behind him, Kane's voice intervened. He confirmed the information from his sources, but added a warning if nothing has changed. There should also be one particularly vile figure hiding in that refuge. Rhea looks puzzled at this conversation. Adele explains that his plan is not just to strengthen their military force, but also to neutralize a future threat and prevent a possible counterattack before it even begins. He turns his attention to Kane, who is now in formal attire. Adele says that those who live by stealing from the hardworking are not so easy to forgive, and asks if they can even be hired. Seeing Kane's anxiety, he places a calming hand on his shoulder and asks to prepare for what is to come. He asks Adele if he should go too. Adele confirms and adds that CO will also be with them, and this clearly causes concern. He suddenly turns around and shouts at Adele not to worry his mother. He reassures her if something happens, they will have magic they can rely on. His mother, Miss Mersha, looks at him, her face full of anxiety. Suddenly, Freya Raskart bursts into the conversation, radiating bright energy. She announces that she will join them as well. Boasting of her skills, she says she studied under Mr. Balon. With a confident smile, she whispers to Adele, "Count on me." The sudden statement momentarily stuns Adele. Next to him, Miss Mersha lowers her gaze and quietly admits the presence of turbivants. She shifts his attention to Miss Mersha, thanks her, and also offers to pack a lunch for her, to which she looks up and responds with a soft, grateful smile. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, Seer appears and startles Adele. She excitedly exclaims that it's a picnic, asks if there will be something tasty, like meat pies, and says she won't go if she doesn't get a lunch pack. Adele is shocked because she realizes she has been listening all this time. Kane, holding a basket on his sword, surveys the surroundings and asks if this is a thieves' hideout. Nearby, Sia notices a deadly tension in the air. Adele, in a dark cloak, looks thoughtfully, recalling that in the game this place was supposed to be a village with fields. The opponent does not go unnoticed. Men too rough-looking to challenge them appear. One with spiky blonde hair loudly complains about the noise and asks what children are doing here, and his companion in a dark bandana asks if this is the group Dell mentioned. They have gathered to inspect them, and Adele silently wonders if it's only these two because the man from that game seems to be absent. The man in the bandana warns them to step back, insisting the area is dangerous and monsters live here, but his companion stops him. "Wait, look more closely at their clothes." Warning from companions Giz and Pause. The blonde notices their fine clothes and, clicking his tongue, realizes that someone is probably chasing them. The blonde bandit suddenly has a 3D realization. He suggests capturing the group and demanding ransom from their parents. After all, even scoundrels from bad families need money to survive, and with this idea, both men draw their swords. When the plan is decided, the two men rush forward, shouting that only their noble origin is to blame. Adele calmly calls Kane, ordering him to kill them, but if possible, to neutralize them. McCain is already in motion. With dazzling speed, he draws his blade. The bandits freeze in shock. With one smooth move, he parries the attack, breaks the opponent's sword, and kills him before his companion can react. She watched the trick. She knew that Kane trained with a sword every day, but never thought he would become so strong. It was like in a game when he corners the villains. Sharp, decisive move, and he disarmed the bandit. His sword flew off and soared through the air. The bandit fell to the ground, unconscious. Adele, with a sparkle in her eyes, called Kane. Jean, no less impressed, praised him for how well he handled it, and admitted she did not expect such strength from him. The noise attracted the attention of several more bandits lounging on the stairs of the neighboring building. The one with spiky hair shouted, demanding to know what was going on, since he was supposed to be on guard. The group came out to meet them, and the spiky-haired bandit, not believing that his comrade was defeated by a child, noticed they were outnumbered and mockingly shouted, "Goodbye." But someone stepped forward with a sinister smile, considering it humiliating to fight a child, and mockingly asked, "Are you children too?" Energy sparkled around his hands. "I can handle this," she said, and power flared. The bandits froze in shock, wondering where such might came from. Bandits froze in shock as right before them transformed into a seductive, voluptuous adult woman. One of them grunted, asking if she was trying to seduce them with her new form. Adele was stunned, wondering if it was magic, and Jo with a confident smile confirmed her suspicion and noted that she surprisingly has a good eye. She basks in the lustful gazes of the group and admits she does not mind such attention. Below, while Kane and Adele watch, she raises her hand and sharply snaps her fingers. Thick snake-like magical tentacles grew from the ground, grabbed the bandits by the ankles and tossed them upside down. They screamed, overwhelmed by shock and horror, hanging helplessly. Having neutralized Fred, she turns to Adele and with a challenging tone, asks if she really thought she couldn't handle such a small bunch of enemies, reminding her that she is a witch 1,000 years old, not some child of hers. Just as she spoke, another figure appeared on the path ahead. A man in armor shouted, sternly asking what they were doing here. He glanced up at his men still hanging upside down, and one of them shouted about a brother. The armored man shifted his gaze to Adele, asked what kind of demon was messing with such trash here, and warned that if she did not explain, he would also treat her like a child. In an instant, the man lunged forward like a blurred flash, cutting through the magical tentacles in one sweep and freeing his people. Kane and Adele recognize him immediately. Kane confirms he is the bandit leader. The CEO watches with interest, impressed that he severed her magic-filled whip with one strike, and Kane grimly adds that this man is their main target. He could only watch as the man in armor, who called himself Rendell, lunged forward with a powerful strike from above. Adele met the attack, his sword tensely parried the blow, and that force knocked him to one knee. Confrontation subsided. Adele glanced at Kane, who was leaning against the tree, still dazed after the lightning defeat, and apologized, admitting he had no right to involve the child in this encounter. His apology was interrupted by Rendell's voice. The warrior with a tense face declared that he wanted to see them as his comrades, no matter the cost, and then sharply asked why they had come here. The question sparked a flash of memories, in Adele's hypocrisy of the noble world, and the hidden injustice that forced people like Rendell to be cruelly expelled. He decided that honesty is the best way. Looking Randall straight in the eyes, Adele said that he came here precisely to meet him. Adele spoke in more detail and admitted that he knew. Randall was once a knight of the kingdom, said that he fled not in disgrace, but to protect common people from a society full of envy and injustice, and suddenly, a memory flashed in his mind of a knight who helped a fallen commoner. When the truth was laid on the table, Adele made a stunning offer. He wanted to hire Randog and his men as mercenaries, promising in return to take care of the welfare of Randog's campaign. This offer left the battle-hardened warrior completely speechless. A young nobleman stepped forward and introduced himself as Del Raidlick, the Lord's son, adding that the skills of the one called Kane were known even in his family's lands, while one of the bandits looked as if asking why Kane would work for a street thief like him. Tension shifts to the armored man standing in front of a simple wooden house. Adele falls silent, surprise on her face, and the warrior Rendell asks if she knows who he is, adding with a smile that of course she has probably heard about him from the knights. The expression on his face tightens into a scowl. He spits, saying that the nobles collect taxes supposedly for the people, but in reality only to fill their greedy pockets, and with contempt declares that all nobles are simply scum. He turns away, his voice full of rage, and wonders how they could sacrifice their own people just to earn more. Clenching his fist, he says he sharpened the sword only to kill him. And then, suddenly turning sharply to them again, Rendell growls that he will kill every last nobleman with his own hands, and warns them, "Leave immediately if you understand what this is about." One hand pressed, the other on his hip, he seems to ask if their visit is just a cover. He wonders why they traveled so far to see him specifically, then clenches his fist and makes a stunning confession. He himself is a nobleman. Quiet whispers sounded around. Someone asks if Rendell really lets them go. Another says that the young aristocrat Adele is different from the others, but Rendell sharply tells him to be silent, and this revelation hangs in the air while Adele realizes the impossible truth. Rendell, the one who despises the aristocracy, turns out to be one of them. They apologized to Kane and asked if he was injured. Kane insisted that he was perfectly fine and satisfied, and Adele suggested that perhaps they should leave for today. As they were about to set off, a huge horned bear jumped out of the forest and blocked their way. Adele froze in disbelief, recognizing it as a high-level monster that does not belong here, in this mountain pass. The warrior Rendell grimaced, realized that the creature was probably attracted by the scent of demonic blood on him. Oh, what bad luck! He told the children he would handle it, and if they valued their lives, to run immediately when he shouted. Warning them, C placed a hand on Adele's shoulder and pushed him to run. She said that if Adele used his magic, they would simply blow that monster away, but Adele stood as if rooted to the spot. Kane, however, was thinking about something else entirely. He recalled how Rendell declared he wanted to kill nobles, but now that same man was risking his own body to protect. This very contradiction suddenly sparked a bright, instant idea in Adele's mind. His surprise turned into a fierce smile. he realized this was the perfect chance to make Rendell their ally. He sharply ordered Kane and C to prepare, announcing that they would join the warrior in battle. In the glow of light, Dell stepped forward, extended his hand, and decisively said he would join Rendell and fight. Their decision was immediately questioned. The Witch of Misfortune asks if they really will join, and Kane warns that it is too dangerous. He reminds Adele that these are the same people who tried to take them hostage, and questions why Risk lives for the whole world. Adele smiled gently and said that, of course, they owe nothing to the bandits, but firmly added that he cannot just stand and watch people fall into trouble right before their eyes. It looked as if someone was embarrassed. The Wicked Witch asks if this is really such a bad reason, for which Kane immediately apologizes. Adele mentally decides that Randall is vital to them so as not to doom themselves to death, and breathes a sigh of relief that he agreed to cooperate. She admits that the trouble is great and nothing can be done about it. She encourages the group by announcing that the three of them will fight the monster. Grabbing the staff, Adele swears that she will not allow anyone to die. The monster they will have to face is a real horror. A huge black wolf with glowing eyes growls and looms over the bandits. The men froze in place, paralyzed by fear. Meanwhile, Randall stands opposite his enemy. A stern expression on his face, he looks into the darkness at the huge shadowy creature with glowing eyes and mutters, not believing why such a being is here. He recognized this creature immediately. It was the boss of this land, a creature that usually dwells in the deepest parts of the mountains, and he could not understand why such a monster ended up here. Gathering his willpower, he ordered the bandits to retreat and said he would meet the monster alone. The fight would be difficult. He knew that, but he could not allow them to be slaughtered, and the frightened men only stammered, saying his name. The beast responded to his challenge with a deafening roar. Its huge jaws opened wide, and the bandit jumped back in pure horror. Ignoring his order, the bandits foolishly rushed forward, confident that their numbers gave them an advantage. The elf beckoned them to stop, but it was already too late. The monster reacted instantly, swiping its huge clawed paw. Gritting his teeth, he rushed forward, and at the last moment pushed one of the men to safety just as the blow was about to land. His armored arm took the full force of the blow. The impact threw him to the ground and sparks flew around, and when the bandits shouted his name, he swung his sword in a powerful arc in response, which cut deeply into the ground of the creatures. He leaned heavily on his sword. He again called his people to flee while there was a chance. One of the bandits apologized for dragging him into their trouble, but another did not dare to leave their leader. He clenched his hand, a burning pain penetrating to the very bones. Despite the injury, he turned and growled at his comrades, insisting that he told them to run. Against the backdrop of darkness appeared the monster Hornbear, its eyes burning with malice, and it stepped forward with a heavy, deliberate step. Dropping to his knees and leaning on his sword, Rendall realized that his last strike had hit the reverse scale of the beast. He knew that if he were at full strength, he would have a chance, but in his current state, the creature proved too strong, and he grimaced, wondering if this was his end, while two bandits watched in horror from afar. Fleetingly, the image of a girl with a bow in her hair flashed before his eyes, and suddenly the name Kate flickered in his thoughts. Memory shattered into pieces as the horned bear lunged its huge paws descended to crush her. Suddenly, a bullet of pure water shot through the air and hit the beast right in the eye. The beast roared in pain and recoiled from the unexpected magical attack. Rendell turned and saw Adele with a staff in her hand. She sighed with relief she had arrived just in time and asked why he hadn't fled like the others. Before he could answer, Adele calmly said that you can't just abandon a person who is about to be eaten by monsters and run away. They found themselves in a quiet village of wooden houses. Breaking the silence, Adele's voice cut through the air full of anxiety. More than about the battle itself, they asked. Was he okay? The question hung in the air, met only by stunned silence. The monster Hornbear, boiling with rage, roars at the group and demands to know why they are not looking at him, and Adele anxiously notices that all the creature's hostility is now directed solely at them. In response to the threat, Kane instantly draws his sword, stands before Dell, and decisively orders him to step back. He swears to protect the common people. Rendall and the bandits stand stunned, for they know that Kane is a nobleman. They rushed forward with swords raised high and struck the monster in the chest, but the blow bounced off its tough skin and showered the air with sparks, causing no harm. From behind, Rendall shouted Kane's name, irritated that they were wasting time while those noble ones who should be fighting stood aside. It responded with a powerful swipe of its claw. King managed to block the attack. A dazzling light flashed, but the tension from the force of the blow was visible on him. The monster's paw was about to crush them when Rendall lunged forward and deflected the blow with his sword. He muttered irritably that the situation forced him to intervene. He turns his fierce gaze to Adele and demands to know why that noble brat is just standing still. Randall orders them to use magic to finish off the monster, and Adele freezes, not uttering a word. He pressed on her, shouting at Adele not just to watch but to act, and Adele, gripping the staff tightly, considers the options and realizes their most powerful spell is the water sphere from before. Will it be enough to deliver the decisive blow? The hand froze, the staff in hand. Kane in the witch's hat notes how annoying they are. Kane's hand ignites with magical energy, explaining that this will allow Adele to use magic of a much higher caliber, and a wave of power pierces her body, leaving Adele amazed at what happened. Directing their newly found energy, they unleash the spell Water Fawn. The explosion of magical water crashes down on the horned bear monster with stunning force. The monster recoiled from the blow and crashed to the ground with a roar broken and defeated, while Adele stood frozen in shock, barely realizing that she was the one who had felled the beast. The same one turned to them, asked what they thought, and enthusiastically praised the power of CIS magic, while Adele was completely bewildered, was stunned by the realization that they, in their weakest state, had just dealt the final blow to such a formidable creature. Nearby, Rendell addresses Kane, sincerely thanks them for the timely help, and confirms that it was the right move. The rescued man, not believing his eyes, said in surprise that such a small child had defeated the monster, and that Adele was not like the other nobles at all, while Rendell watched, and Adele approached him with a bright smile and boldly asked why a noble should thank a simple ally. He turned away, reminding Adela of their offer to hire him as a guard, then quietly confessed the truth. He was a deserter from the knightly order and had been expelled from the kingdom. While he continued his confession, Adele listened, eyes wide open and intensely focused. Randall explained that his crime was stealing from certain nobles, which earned him their deep hostility. Then he looked into her eyes and asked if she really wanted to hire him, knowing about the significant risk that worried him. She froze for a moment, the heavy decision reflected on her face, and then called to him, "Win." She hadn't had time to continue when they were interrupted by the same bandits Randall had fought. A boy with spiky hair rushed to explain that although Randall stole, he stole from corrupt nobles, and in fact wanted to distribute those riches to the poor, and build a place where people who fled the kingdom could live with human dignity. Other bandits eagerly chimed in. Randall is a great man, not some ordinary thief to be shamed for his actions. To strengthen their plea, they all suddenly fell to their knees and pressed their foreheads to the ground before Dell. They begged her to hire their leader as a mercenary. Randall stood froze in shock, and Dell looked down at the man who had bowed to the ground. With a bright and determined expression, Adele lifts her gaze and firmly says that her feelings on the matter will not change, even if she is not asked. She insists on hiring the man in armor and asks him to raise his head. Armored Randall stood with his comrades near an old wooden hut. One of the Murrants warned that hiring him might lead some nobles to find and repel them, and added that since they are on the border, they cannot side with those on the other side. Randall, however, seems to have his own condition. He turned to Adele with a stern face and asks if Adele, as a noble, can truly humble herself before common people, claiming that it is the nobility that brought the world to such decay and does not understand how they could ever forgive such people. They respond with unwavering confidence, extending a hand, telling Randall that if he really wants to save people, he should come to them and offer him a position, addressing him by his full name, this time Randall Ball. Randall is stunned by the straightforwardness of the offer and mutters to himself how simple this Dell is. He lowers his gaze to Adele, a slight smile playing on his lips, and asks if those words are a lie. Adele explains that when they received the title, they always felt they could leave their estates if they wished. Hearing this, Randall sets his condition: if Adele breaks the promise, he will leave immediately. Adele turns gray without hesitation. They extend a hand and firmly shake Randall's hand, sealing the deal. At that moment, Randall gives the last ammunition. Don't forget these words. While Randall stood guard, two villagers approached the witch. Sienna, one of them, sighed with relief, happy that Randall had joined, and apologized for the trouble caused. However, she was more interested in Adele and immediately asked her name. Sienna, with a mischievous smile, asked aloud if her master was interested in this young woman whom no one notices. The reaction was not cheerful at all. Adele stepped forward, sternly called C by name, and demanded a precise answer when exactly she became their companion, adding that she would remain at least for the near future. Two peasants nervously swallowed and watched this tense scene. She replied Siya, simply saying it was a pity to raise their hopes over something so boring, and then showed that what they had seen earlier was not her true form, which caught Dell by surprise. She explained that her previous appearance was only an illusion, and at that moment the shimmer above her chest cracked like glass, revealing her true, more modest figure. The peasants froze with wide-open eyes, shocked that they had been deceived by illusions, while Adele just watched and finally understood everything. When the matter was settled, the group set off. It was time to head to the territory of Lake Raid. Upon arrival, Adele, now wrapped in a new black cloak, looked at the sprawling city, and with a proud smile they declared, "This is my domain, the Ridlick territory." Looked down on the city streets like a picture of calm and everyday routine. Randall called out, and Adele noted how peaceful the scene was, telling him to simply accept their words of praise. They thoughtfully recalled the path they had traveled. Despite a few surprises, they were glad that Randall was now in their company. A faint smile played on their lips, and recalling, they made a rather grand promise to show the oppressed world free from exploitation. But in their hearts they admit, leading this world is not their fate. This role, they say, belongs to the heroes from story, Artel's Miracle. In their minds the story's finale instantly emerges, a peaceful world born from the ashes of corrupt nobility, but this picture has its price: the complete downfall of families like theirs. This grim future only strengthens their resolve. To survive, they are forced to rely on the story's main hero. They believe that Randall's pursuers, the Royal Knights, are unlikely to follow them soon into this remote borderland, so they decide to discuss their next steps once settled. As they walked, a hooded man noticed their approach, froze at the sight of the unfamiliar armored group, and his eyes widened in recognition. He shouted upon seeing Dell. Suddenly, an unexpected collision tore through. Adele stopped. Two fully armored men blocked her path. The knight in front, with a ponytail peeking from under his helmet, announced their affiliation, the armor of the Knight Order of the Kingdom, and Adele, stunned, could only freeze with one thought in her head. Why are they here in such a place? Adele stood, not believing her eyes. Before her were the armors of the Royal Knights, and she could not understand why the knights from the capital stood right before her. From a hidden position, I watched how the scene unfolded. There was a man in a hood with a scar. He knew pursuers would come for him, but did not expect them to appear at this very moment. His eyes narrowed when he recognized the color of the lead knight's armor. At the same time, Adele shockingly realized that the commander of the knights herself had come for. Suddenly Adele shuddered. A young woman with a large bow in her hair appeared nearby, and to Adele's great surprise, she recognized her as a character from the original story. One woman warned that the knights were already entering the estate grounds. She insisted that a fight must not break out between them and Randall's group. She turned to the hooded group and ordered Kane to take Randall and the others to a secluded place while she dealt with the knights herself. Kane confirmed the order, and Adele froze. She realized that the people she once used had now sided with the heroes. Adele shouted, asking if Balan or Mayor Shaw were here, and the young woman replied that they were not. And in the distance Adele noticed another group, the Bell of Salvation, led by Mayor Shaw, and she became even more confused. Their father met them at the door. He sighed with relief that they had returned alive, and immediately said that the Royal Knights were to visit them. A woman in full armor stepped forward and introduced herself to Adele. Kate Rosenberg, captain of the Royal Knights. Her name and face instantly exploded in Adele's consciousness. This was the same character from the world she once knew only as a story. The father led the group into the reception room, and as soon as everyone settled, he addressed Captain Rosenberg. What business could bring the Royal Knights to such a remote border wilderness? The captain explained that they were pursuing a knight who deserted after an incident and had come to check if the deserter Randall had fled into their lands. Adele listened and realized with horror that her suspicions were confirmed. She continues and names the deserter's full name, Randall Baldes. Kate insists that this is exactly the person who will definitely conspire with Bella's Salvation to steal goods from Unlab Marquiat. And for Adele this became the final confirmation: this is undoubtedly the real Kate from Flash. Adele's father waved it off, saying it was a trifle, and even offered to provide any information he had, but such an indifferent reaction shocked Adele. She could not believe that the same fiercely righteous Randall, whom she remembered, could stoop to such a thing. Memory instantly flashed in her mind about Randolph standing against a group of bandits. When he opposed them, they mockingly accused him, as if he were just another corrupt nobleman stealing from the poor, and this memory brings a wave of embarrassment and anxiety over death. The confrontation intensifies. Captain Kate Rosenberg stands against Randall, their blades locked in a tense duel. Her thoughts racing, she knows that if the Royal Knights fully engaged in battle with such a man, the outcome would be obvious. But she also understands that a direct conflict would inevitably drag many soldiers into these lands, and with fury in her eyes she shouts that it will engulf the entire country in the flames of war. In a well-furnished room, Adele smiles kindly at her guest and says that since she cannot convince her to return home, he and his servants will instead show her around the estate, adding that the Knight Commander is also quite busy and knows these places well. Kate Rosenberg's facial expression darkened. Irritation distorts her features. She decisively says that she and Randall will search the estate themselves and strictly asks for permission to do so. She suddenly turns, leans over the table with unexpected fervor, and exclaims that she understands and is ready to fully cooperate, while Adele stands nearby, stunned, and asks if he is really telling the truth. He calmly explains, it is getting dark, so he has prepared rooms for them. The search he proposes can begin tomorrow. He calls for Ershaw, asking her to escort the three guests to their rooms, and Kane's mother appears at the door, nods in response, and tells everyone to follow her. As he and Kane walked down the corridor to his room, Adele secretly worried. He had asked Rendell's group to trust Kane, but now that the mansion had become their base, he feared that during tomorrow's search they would find something. Meanwhile, in one of the guest rooms, Freya Raskart sits on the bed with an irritated expression and complains to Mayor Shah that Adele has been restless since they returned to the room. Panic throws his mind into frenzy. The thought that their carefully planned schemes might come under close scrutiny fills him with cold horror, and he realizes with dread, if they find something, it would be no surprise at all. His thoughts were spinning until Mersha's gentle voice interrupted them, seeing his concern. She softly said that he was probably tired and suggested a tea break. She hands him a steaming cup, explaining that it is a special herbal tea with a healing effect, and gently suggests that it will help him relax and find peace. Mershu firmly embraces the young lord in soothing arms, and Shira gently assures him that everything will be fine, and even if some villains have infiltrated the domain, the knights will definitely take care of him. She gently strokes his head, a smile warms her face, and she thoughtfully recalls that she has not yet told him about Randall's career. Meanwhile, Kate Rosenberg notes that it is unusual for the Knight Commander to search for a simple deserter, and adds that her subordinate Randall is also a very serious person. Hearing this, Adele sips his tea, felt a chill of anxiety run through his body. It seemed to him that such a principled person would never be forgiven for hot temper, and he shifts his gaze to Randall, who stands with a gloomy expression, as if sensing hostility in Kate. Turning away from the tense dispute, Adele addresses Marisha, who is now holding Kane's younger sister. He asks if she could prepare another portion of calming tea, and Marisha readily agrees. He adjusted his tie, a determined expression on his face, as he pondered the new information. The details did not add up. Why is the commander of the Knights personally leading the search? It did not suit Kate, her serious character and rank, and this annoying feeling of unease, he realized, could be the key to a breakthrough, so he decided to ask the commander of the Knights directly. In her room, Kate Rosenberg leaned against the wall, her face full of irritation and anxiety. She whispered the name Randall, catching her breath and asking why she still had not found what she was looking for. Despair deepens. She had combed the entire area and found no clue, and with horror realizes that if this continues, someone else might find it first, and all her efforts will be in vain. A gleam of determination cuts through her anxiety. She clenches her jaw and firmly decides, success must come to her alone, to no one else. Her tense thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a quiet sound from the door, and she turns, wondering who could be coming so late. She approaches the door and opens it. The hinge emits a soft creak. In the hall stands Adele, smiling kindly. They apologize for disturbing her rest and solemnly introduce themselves as the son of the Lord. Adele gestures towards the card on the tray and says she brought tea. She thought perhaps Kate would want to talk, then cautiously asks if it is not an inconvenient time, and Kate froze, looking at this unexpected offer. She agreed to tea. Adele's voice was soft when they brought the cup, and Kate quietly whispered in response, "Thank you." "Well, all right." They approached the small table between them, announced that the tea was ready, placed the teapot and poured it into the cups, and Kate watched. Her face was inscrutable. But suspicions were already raging in her mind. The son of the Lord would hardly come alone to the Knight Captain's room, especially at such a late hour. She clutched her shawl, wondering if this was a trick to spy on her. When Adele announced that the tea was served, Kate became alert and decided not to lower her guard. Whatever the reason for the visit, she would not be caught off guard, and she raised the cup to her lips. The taste turned out unexpectedly exquisite, and her surprise blazed in her wide-open eyes. Noticing this, Adele asked somewhat uncertainly, "Really tasty?" A bright, sincere smile blossomed on Adele's face. They explained that it was a special herbal tea prepared by their maid. It was chosen specifically for its calming effect. Adele continued, frankly admitting that they noticed how tense she seemed, and that the crew hoped to help her relax a little, assuring that they did not come to spy. The simple, sincere kindness of this gesture struck Kate. She looked from the cup in her hands to the child before her, and felt a pang of guilt, realizing how wrongly she had judged such a caring person. She thinks that Adele is clarifying. She is not noble, but a simple knight, and Kate asks Adele to speak to her more simply, without formal addresses. She notes that they are alone in the room. No one will overhear their conversation. Kate confesses that the matter with Rendall has shaken much of her usual calm. In response, Dell gently says that it is best if they both speak as they feel comfortable. With a friendly wink, Dell addresses her simply as Kate, and the knight seems to freeze from surprise. Dell insists that Kate can also call her Dell without any formalities, although Kate hesitates. Her hesitation retreats. A warm, sincere smile blooms on her face. She agrees to the arrangement, and Adele responds in kind, calmly taking a sip from Attica. Swallowing the tea, her friendly demeanor instantly disappears, and a sharp, calculated expression appears on her face. Mentally, she convinces herself that everything is going according to her plan. The tea and light conversation were a deliberate trick to catch Kate off guard and find out her true intentions, and so far this trick is working. Maintaining a measured mask, she directly asks Kate what kind of person Randall is, the man and the knights are pursuing. Inside, she prepares to finally find out what Kate really thinks about both Randall and the Marquis of Blanklesh. Dell, holding a cup of tea, and with a slight smile, thoughtfully said aloud that if the Knight Commander himself is searching, then Kate behaved quite childishly, and added that such a formidable person as Kate is unlikely to remain just a subordinate. These words hit a nerve. Kate jumped to her feet, confused, shouted who dared to speak about her pig, but instantly corrected herself, insisting that the Bangrat Marquis has nothing to do with this. She collapses onto the table, back to Adele, and quietly confesses that she and Randall Gar are actually childhood friends. Every ray in the sunny courtyard takes her back to those days when she and young Randall practiced with wooden swords. Kate recalls how from early childhood they honed their swordsmanship skills and dreamed of joining the Knight Order to protect people, and even the hardest training was a joy because he was nearby. And Adele listens, and a flash of surprise crosses her face. This story is new to her. Memory fades and a gloomy expression settles on Kate's face. She remembers how she believed that together they could stand fearlessly against any enemy. But that dream shattered when Randall, without saying a word to her, supposedly stole the Marquis's gold and single-handedly abandoned the Order of Knights. Tears ran down her face. She clutched her head in her hands, tormented by the thought what could that oath they took have meant. Meanwhile, another nobleman with a thin mustache greedily smiles as coins slip through his fingers and says that although the Marquis has a bad reputation and is clearly greedy, he does not believe that he treats his soldiers like disposable pawns. He turns back to Adele, who listens attentively as Kate continues her story. In the memory, Kate and Randall stand side by side in knight armor, and she explains that it was precisely because of this shared path that she wanted to accompany him to the royal capital, because she believed they were heading in the same direction. Determination freezes on her face. She says she must find him first to personally ask why he acted that way, and although she may have to punish him later, first she has to hear it from him. Her face contorts with anger as she recalls the fury that was in him then. Aloud she asks if that is why Randall broke his promise to her, and Adele remains silent, accepting it as a confession. Adele turned away slightly, digesting what she heard, and said that the story turned out not to be what she expected, but that was exactly what strengthened Kate's strategy. She thanked Kate for sharing such an important thing, and Kate in turn felt that she had gone too far and was unpleasant. In response to her self-deprecation, Adele returns with a gentle smile, reassuring her that everything is fine. Kate looks up, surprised by such simple kindness. For a moment she fell silent. Her storm of feelings quiets and turns into quiet reflection. She softly whispers, "Good night." Adele turns to leave the room, throws in a final reassurance and promises that everything will be resolved. Kate, left alone, sits on the bed and feels a small calm descend upon her. The next day her anxiety does not subside when Kate finds Adele in the room. Her voice cuts through the air. She sharply asks why she is here, insisting that she asked her to stay in place. Adele responded with a calming smile and told her to calm down, explaining that her subordinates had already gone to look for Random. But her words only add fuel to Kate's fire. She looks at her voice rising with disbelief as she asks if Adele understood anything from their conversation last night, and again says that she seriously intended to find him herself. Kate froze in shock, and Adele calmly turned away and called someone just outside the door. "Please bring some tea." In came none other than Rendell Baldies with a tray in his hands. Adele nods to him, and Kate stands in the shadows, stunned and whispering, "Why, the very man she was looking for stands before her, dressed as a servant." Kate Rosenberg stands, unbelieving, and points an accusing finger. She demands to know why Rendell Baldies is here, interrogates his servant like a tire, and in a sharp tone asks where his pride as a member of the royal guard has gone. Her expression becomes stern. She accuses him of pretending and refuses to believe that it is really him. From the other end of the room, where he stands next to Adele, Rendell calmly asks what she means. The service on the table quietly rings, as if whispering that the man she wanted is no longer here. The one standing before her claims he is only a servant of the young master, Adele Ridley. Kate insists on an explanation, and Adele's face darkens completely. A shadow of understanding or anxiety flashes across it. Then she turns her attention to Adele and asks if she knows about the debauchery of the nobles, but without waiting for an answer, she waves it off. "This is no longer my concern." Handel interrupts, his voice firm, stating that it really is his concern. He reveals the truth about what happened to him. He was dismissed from his position because Bang Rash Marquis framed him and accused him of a crime. This confession leaves Kate speechless. He remembered everything clearly. The nobles who caused his downfall accepted a bag of money, a bribe to release the criminal. He had seen this scene more than once. He continues the story, says that the bribe he saw was later distributed to common people, and this strangely refreshed Acti. Kate Rosenberg listens, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. She is completely silent. As events unfolded, Adele observed and thought to herself that so far everything was going according to plan. Last night, after Kate shared her story, Randall made a proposal. Now Randall asks Adele whether to let the knight's companions inside, but Adele simply orders them to rest in their rooms, and quietly thinks to herself how Randall was handing out money to the common people. He recalls how the Knight Commander Kate had earlier told him that she and Randall were actually childhood friends. The bandits froze in surprise. One asks if it is really true, another looks with disbelief, and asks if YK would have pursued him if they were friends. He says that Bangrash Marquette seems to be using Kate's sincerity to manipulate her. While he explains this, the other men are distracted by a female adventurer who clearly enjoys their attention, and Adele watches all this with a slight irritation on her face. They address the group. It is impossible to comprehend, after everything heard, that Kate could have simply not noticed Randall, but they fall silent, hinting that it is not so simple. It is precisely because of this, they say with a confident smile, that he absolutely must meet with Kate. The statement completely caught Randall off guard. His eyes widened and he froze in shock. They continue to explain that Kate will inevitably pursue Randall, with an obsession that will not let her rest until she finds him if he truly understands this. Randall hand-erupts, his voice trembling with irritation. Must he spend the rest of his life clinging to his status as a fugitive? He reminds them that he left knighthood to create a place where people could live with dignity. Reaching out his hand to him, they say they want him to live with that same dignity just like those he seeks to protect, and Randall looks down, a slight smile appearing on his lips because he understands. The argument is sound. An unshakable determination froze on his face. Smiling broadly, he agrees to the meeting. Looking up at the towering man, Adele calls his name, pleased with the result, and asks him to take them to her. In the spotlight is the adventurer Sia, sitting nearby. With a knowing smile, she tells Adele that she has completed the task and everything is clear. Shock realization flashed across Kate Rosenberg's face. To imagine that the guilty party was simply allowed to go, and that these two detectives acted exactly that way all along. Meanwhile, in another room, a scarred man stands silently before Dell, who is still seated. In her chambers, Kate processes the news. Marquis de Pravati has finally become clear to her. Although it stunned her, she decides that it was right that the two of them explained everything to her directly. She thinks that this revelation should be enough for Kane to back down, but a struggle arises in her heart. Is it really worth, knowing the truth, to allow the guilty party to escape this very night? Her inner conflict bursts out. She turns to the scarred man in Dell and sharply asks why they do not stand against such injustice, and why the Knights of the Kingdom remain on the sidelines. Her voice breaks into a scream, her calm shatters. She demands to know why they simply endure this evil instead of fighting. Our man decisively interrupts the tirade with a calm but firm response. He says that Kane's position is too harsh and that his faction's argument is just theory, admits that their position remains unchanged, but adds that in any case, all who have committed injustice must be arrested. Adele is shocked and nearby Maid watches this scene. He stood his ground and Kate Rosenberg looked distrustfully and sharply demanded an answer. Is he really going to arrest most of the nobility? She insisted that he must understand. That cannot be. Sitting nearby, Kate added that she herself is ready to do whatever is necessary. Turning back to Adele, he placed his hand on his chest and resolutely declared that, having become the ruler of this land, he will definitely achieve this goal. Kate's eyes widened in shock when she realized the audacity of his plan to use the development of this territory as the first step to radically change the entire corrupt country. Later, Adele, with admiration in her voice, told Frey Arisgard and the maid and confessed that she never imagined Randall could trust her so much. Kate, however, remained aside, her gaze lowered and silent heavy thoughts. Her thoughts were interrupted when Randall placed a weapon between them. She looked at him, accusation sounding in her voice. He clearly forgot the oath he once gave her. He did not answer. His tense gaze stopped only on the sharp, shining tip of the blade. He stands silently as Kate Rosenberg, pointing a sword at him, resolutely says that he has no right to speak about his family. She accuses him of no longer being the man she once knew, and behind her Frey Arisgard and Adele watch, shocked. At the sudden hostility, Adele steps forward and asks Kate what happened to her. Kate angrily orders Adele to step back, warns that hiding a known criminal is a serious crime, and that she will deal with both of them. Without saying a word, she rushed with the sword and cut through the nearby table, and Randall and the others barely managed to dodge. She coldly remarked that if they had not dodged, she would have caught them right there. The situation became unbearable. Randall turned to Adele and said there was no other choice. They would have to act harshly. Adele agreed and resolutely declared that she would take him to the capital for trial. Adele looks at him with complete trust and tells him to go all out and not worry, and he assures her that he has his master's permission and does not intend to die. With determination, he directs all his attention to Kate. His face hardens, he sighs because he hoped for her understanding, but but sees that she is not going to listen and reproaches her. As a knight of the state, shame does not suit you. His words stun her for a moment. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Randall draws his blade and lunges forward. Their swords clash with a deafening clang. Sparks fly, and Kate calls out his name helplessly. While the duel rages somewhere far away and the spectators grow increasingly worried, the maid, pressing Dell tightly, is confused and does not know what to do and fears that they will all be captured. For your Rascart, her expression changes. She notices that Randall is retreating and tries to comfort, telling Dell that everything is fine. Their anxiety seems not to reach Adele. She raises her eyes with a bright, unwavering smile and firmly says that Randall will win. She insists that he will definitely emerge victorious. Inspired by this confidence, her expression softened and spread into a smile. She turned to the maid and agreed, saying that one must believe in him, and the maid, looking at the young master with admiration, only whispered, "Adele." The clang of steel resounds, and Randall presses on Kate, using his advantage. He tells her that she does not understand the difference in their strength, brushing off her words as naive. Tears rolled down her face. She begged him, called him by name, asked him to leave her and save himself, insisting that he should not stay alone, and his face was gloomy and resolute. In response to her pleas, he suddenly sharply jerks the blade, wrenching the sword from her hands. Her eyes widen in shock. She is humiliated. Her hand was left empty. A cry of denial escaped her lips. The sword fell with a rumble onto the stone floor. Kate stands, unable to believe her eyes, while Randall looks arrogantly at his sword companion. He turned away from her, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, and says that even before leaving he saw the rigidity of the knights and realized that he could no longer serve such a country. Suddenly understanding flashed across her face, and she exclaimed that this was exactly why he left the Knight Order, to fight injustice of the corrupt nobility with his own hands and create a place where people could live in peace. She listened as Randall spoke about their childhood, and his words reminded her of the oath they took together to become knights and serve the country and its people. He declared resolutely that now he was here to protect that very oath, even though their paths had diverged. That was why he became a rebel, to create the perfect world they dreamed of. His words touched her, and tears welled up in her eyes. She finally understood that he had never forgotten their promise. When a tear rolled down her cheek, she quietly admitted her defeat. From the side, Frey Rascart clenched her fists, exclaimed enthusiastically, "What an incredible spectacle this really is." She approached Randolph and told him that if she had lost, she would have been taken prisoner, praised him for fighting with her until the very end, just as Master Adele had ordered. Freya admitted that she got carried away, relieved that no one was hurt, and jokingly told Renaud that now she understood his greatness, and when he blushed embarrassedly, Adele intervened and explained that the plan was actually a little different. He folded his hands and begged the invisible sea to check the statuses of the two duelists, offering 30 cookies for this service, and this offer instantly captivated Frey. He also asked to send the statuses of Kate and Randall. The results of the material assessment appeared. Kate's trust noticeably dropped and anxiety spiked, while Randall showed the opposite, a sharp surge of motivation and dedication. He thoughtfully reviewed the information and suddenly realized, if not for these state glitches, everything could have turned dangerous, a painful reminder that the strong influence of emotions and environment was a factor that simply did not exist in game news. While he is pondering this, Kate silently turns and begins to walk away along Grand Corduroy. Walking down the corridor, Adele calls her by name, his voice quietly echoing in the spacious room. She stops, her back still almost turned, quietly says his name and turns around. In every expression there is a conflict. She feels she has nothing to say, while Adele instead gives a radiant, melting smile and simply asks, "Are you okay?" He stands before Kate. She turns and looks at him directly. Her face has a serious expression as she asks, "Adele, how much have you read?" She presses further, wanting to know if he had anticipated such an ending from the very beginning and approached her knowing this in advance. Her passion slightly subsides. A moment of reflection comes. She recalls earlier spoken words, the promise that everything will be fine. This memory seems to strengthen her resolve. Her gaze sharpens, and she throws him a new, more significant question, her voice trembling with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. "Who are you really?" The question hangs in the air, and Adele freezes silently. Adele stands before Kate Rosenberg, anxiety creeping in. Recalling their conversation from last night, she feels that events are unfolding exactly as they had predicted. Their hand clenches into a tight fist as a terrible thought creeps into their mind. What if Katsu suspects that all this is part of some cunning conspiracy? As if reading their thoughts, Kate's face brightened. She addressed them directly, her voice sharp as she demanded, "Who are you anyway?" The question hung in the air, and they both froze in stunned silence. The accusation stunned Adele, thoughts spinning. They do not understand what Kate meant. How could she know that they are a reincarnated person? panic rises as they realize the seriousness of the situation, and an important character from the original story now looks at them with deep suspicion. Stunned by this sudden turn, Adele grabs her head and exclaims distrustfully, "What is this?" She cannot understand why Kate would be so wary. Meanwhile, in a stylishly furnished office, a man named Balon raises his eyes, surprised, as if he has just been called by name. Nearby, a young woman with short blonde hair looks at him anxiously. The fans want to know what happened. His voice trembled sharply with anxiety. Adele, standing next to the assistant, calls him by name in despair. Waves swept through the reception area, which had turned into complete chaos. The sofa split in half, and the entire space looked as if it had been ravaged by a blade. When Balon points to the ruins, Adele feels inner panic. They had completely forgotten about this room, and nearby stands Frey Rasgard with an embarrassed and shy look. They quickly try to divert attention, whispering to Balon and confusing all versions with wild assumptions. Perhaps Adele says that deserters from that recent incident somehow managed to sneak into the mansion. His face twisted with rage, he grabbed Adele and, shouting, ordered that this reception room was furnished with items of great historical value, each carefully selected, and growled that he would absolutely not forgive whoever was responsible for this. At that moment, a new voice cuts through the tension. Kate Rosenberg appears. Her face is full of anxiety. She intervenes. Making a big incident out of this would be unwise. She wonders aloud how to even explain this situation. She bows deeply before Balon and Adele, her body bent in a gesture of deep repentance, and sincerely apologizes for what happened. Straightening up with a face still burning with shame, Kate takes full responsibility and frankly admits that she was the one who destroyed the room. The argument, she says, escalated into some kind of fight. The deserters are not involved at all. The fault is only hers, and no one else's, while Balon just stands and looks completely stunned by this confession. Adele, with a determined expression, insists that she will compensate for the damages, no matter what. Before she could add a word, Kate Rosenberg steps forward and apologizes to Balon, asks Adele not to make a big deal out of it, and insists that it all happened because of her alone. She continues to beg Adele to stop, repeating that all responsibility lies solely with her, while Balon watches her with a thoughtful expression, stroking his mustache. He winked as if he understood everything and assured that he would not report to the master. In return, he suggested that Kate Rosenberg come to serve them and thus repay her debt. The proposal leaves both Adele and Kate completely bewildered. Balon explained in detail, they cannot simply accept money from a knight of the royal family. This will cause problems with the state. It is much easier and safer to arrange secretly so that she gradually works it off and repays the debt. Kate immediately agrees and sincerely thanks. Balon smiles, says it is not a request, and orders Mersha to prepare a change of clothes for her, and when Adele tries to object, Balon decisively confirms the arrangement with a short yes. He explains to the embarrassed Adele that this arrangement is the best way to establish a connection, and Adele's thoughts race from the very idea of becoming so close that a knight, pressed in a familiar honorifics, could become ordinary. She even imagines Kate as a possible bride, and Balon insists that this is a chance to increase loyalty to Kate, but when she realizes that this might be his true goal, Adele is stunned. Adele panics inside. She finds it outrageous that a character like her can allow such a brazen act towards the heroine. Balon calmly says that for the master Adele this is quite natural, but Adele fiercely rejects this idea, shouting that it is not so at all, and at that moment the door creaked, and a voice announced that they were waiting for Master Adele. In the grand hall, a young woman with reddish-brown hair stood awkwardly in a new maid's uniform. Her posture showed that she was uncomfortable. Adele, Balon, Mersha, and her daughter watched the scene, and Mersha's daughter exclaimed what a cute dress it was, and added that they were given these things along with their salary as part of the new job. Her cheeks flushed with a deep blush as she struggled with the new reality. She told herself that this was for repentance, and she must humbly accept it, even if she did not like it very much. Nearby, Mersha's daughter turns her mother and looks at her widely and pleadingly, asking if she can also wear the uniform. She insists that Mershem change into the same one with her, a proposal that leaves Mershem completely stunned. Soon Mersha stands in exactly the same outfit, her cheeks burning with shame, and her daughter glowing with joy, and calling Adele to see what a cute and frilly new outfit her mother has. She turns away and mumbles that for a woman her age, it is too embarrassing to wear such a cute dress. Adele watches this conversation with an impassive expression. He approaches with a gentle smile and reassures Mayor Shaw that everything is fine and the uniform suits him very well. The touched Mayor Shaw looks up and thanks him. From the side, Bound watches and thinks to himself that he has found Mersha's weak spot. The moment breaks when Mersha's daughter appears in her own little suit with a teddy bear. She declares that wearing matching clothes together is a big deal. Adele points fearfully, and Mersha, overwhelmed with shame, hides her face and pleads for it to stop. Adele smiled, pleased with himself. He proudly declared that his illusion magic had completely changed his appearance, so the choice of clothing no longer mattered. Having dealt with this, he moved on to another matter and entrusted Mayor Shah to take care of Hanlin King. She unhesitatingly takes on the duty and tells Master Adele that he has nothing to worry about, promising to give all her strength to be useful, while other new maids nearby sincerely thank her. The Baileys begin their duties. Adele consults with Ballant and Rendall. He admits that at first he had some doubts, but is confident that entrusting the matter to Mersh will be enough. Ballant seems to agree, and Rendall is silent, his face growing increasingly serious. He confirmed his decision once again, confident that he was doing the right thing, but slipped up calling someone Randall's daughter, and the warrior shuddered at this. Adele, paying no attention, turned and walked down the corridor. Walking down the corridor, he thinks about what he can entrust to them, and he finds it funny that even if he gives work, it will most likely be just simple cleaning. Reaching the door, he pushed it, and before him opened a complete mess. He screamed in shock when he saw his office, completely ransacked. He froze in horror, stammering, because his entire office had been turned upside down. Just then, a familiar voice shouted his name in surprise. He turned away from the door and saw Mayor Shaw on the floor, sobbing, hurriedly ran to her and asked what happened and if she was all right. She sincerely apologized, explaining that while she was busy, she asked the new maid Kate to clean his office, and instead of order, chaos erupted. The picture frame broke and flew into the windowpane, books fell from the shelves, and Kate fell from the ladder and ended up under an avalanche of volumes. While she was telling about the disaster, Rendall appeared in the doorway with a gloomy face, and Adele shouted at him, demanding to know what was going on, pleading for at least some explanation. Before Rendall could answer, Mayor Shaw continued, "In fencing, Kate is the best in the kingdom, but in everything else she is completely hopeless." With a heavy sigh, she admitted that for years she had been cleaning up the mess Kate left in her wake. He processes this new information and realizes with horror that the reliable character he knew from the game is actually incredibly clumsy. Turning his gaze back to the door, he begs Rendall to stop her. Just as he was asking, Kate herself suddenly looked into the room and cheerfully winked. She asked if Adele was okay. She enters the ruins of the office, apologizes and promises to clean everything up immediately, but a moment later dismisses the idea as impossible, saying that one more attempt will lead to the collapse of the estate. She asks Adele not to worry and says that his good intention is already enough, while Adele and Mershester stand stunned. The butler shouted into the void, staring at the broken pieces of the vase on the floor, complaining that the owner's precious item was broken. Adele stood stunned, and the maid Kate offered to bring fresh water for the flowers. She reaches for the flowers. Adele grabs her hand and stops her, firmly telling Kate not to be so careless and insisting that if anyone is to take responsibility, it will be her. Movement and the vase slipped. It fell to the floor, shattering into pieces and splashing Adele with water and scattered flowers, and Kate gasped. After everything, embarrassed Kate hurried to settle matters, apologized for the trouble, and asked Mersh to prepare a bath. Ben told Randall that they would be counting on her. Bathing in the warm bath, Adele replayed the incident in her mind and thought that she had managed to save the vase, and getting wet was a small price to pay for it. Her thoughts instantly turned to Kate, and a pang of anxiety pierced her. She wondered if her response had been too harsh or confrontational. Stepping out of the water, her bare feet touched the floor, and she was still worried, hoping that Kate was not angry with her. He sat on a small stool, still wet from what had happened earlier, and heard Kate's voice. She noted that he was the one who cared about others even when he himself was wrong. His head sharply lifted in shock. Kate stood before him, no longer in a maid's uniform, but in a simple, fitted dress. He whispered her name, completely confused and not understanding why she had changed her tie. The reason for this began 30 minutes earlier. Randall stood with his arms crossed in a room filled with books and papers. With a gloomy expression on his face, he felt that something was wrong, but did not expect it to escalate into such a mess. He surveyed the chaos, and Kate confessed with a downcast expression. Unlike him, she was clumsy and skilled in nothing except sword fighting, so she made it clear that she had no other choice but to cause this mess. He listened and gave a firm order. She must go and properly apologize to her master, while he would clean the room, and speaking about himself in the third person, he also ordered her to apologize to Randug. This stunned her into silence, but she still exclaimed, "Wait," and a blush spread across her face from the sudden realization. No, if she was cleaning and was going to apologize to the master who was already going to bathe, did that mean they would have to bathe together? She froze in this humiliating misunderstanding. She sat down, hands on her knees, preparing for what she thought was about to happen. She approached the bath, her voice trembling, and looking at the stunned Adele, apologized for what had happened earlier as an act of atonement. She offered to wash his bath. He awkwardly recoiled, covered his face, and insisted that no apology was needed, told her not to worry about the vase, and mentally wondered if Kate really behaved like that. Her cheeks were flaming, and she explained that she was apologizing not only for what had happened recently. She explained if the relationship with Randall could not be fixed, she would have to return to the capital, as if she had failed as a knight, and this thought tore from her memory the image of Randall in the heat of battle. She again recalled Randall's words about the tournament and thought with a tremor, did he start this whole strange situation from the very beginning? Adele instantly brushed off her fears and assured her that she was wrong. He insisted that even in his absence, she skillfully fulfilled all her duties as the eye. His words brought tears to her eyes. With a trembling voice, she asked if he really meant that everything would be fine. She clung to the towel wrapped around her chest, her knuckles white. Meanwhile, Adele pondered the situation in the world he knew as a game. Kate had never really been in the protagonist's party, so that meant we needed to find and involve Randall to fill that role. His strategic thoughts were interrupted by Kate. Her voice was soft. She thanked him. Surprised by her gratitude, Adele only looked at her for a moment, and a gentle, satisfied smile blossomed on his face. Kate holds Adele in her arms and calls their name. Tears rolling down Kate's face, she confesses that she really wanted to be the one to deal with Randall Herset. Her face fills with panic and anxiety, her eyes whirl with worry, and she asks if Adele is all right. The next day she stands before Adele near the great manor in full armor, apologizes, and honestly admits that she caused a lot of trouble during her stay, but Adele seems to brush it off and does not accept these apologies. Standing by the gates, she thanks Adele and says with relief that thanks to their help Randall was found and handed over to the Marquis without incident. She is sincerely grateful. She continues with a sincere expression, saying that her actions yesterday are unforgivable and she has no words to justify them. She gently soothes Adele, asks not to share what happened with anyone, promises to protect the honor of the knights, and insists that Adele is in no way involved, can sleep peacefully. A small, relieved smile appears on her face as she admits she understands. She is a bad person. With one last bright smile, Kate solemnly asked Adele, please look after Randall. As Kate Rosenberg walks away, Randall watches her go and says that she finally left. Adele raises his eyes to him, says his name, and apologizes for causing him so much trouble. He smiled gently at Adele and told him not to worry, then added that he never expected such a sweet, younger sister to appear in his life, meaning Kate, and explained that he considers Kate only a sister, asking Adele to stop those thoughts, but Adele insisted that it was not about that at all. His face becomes thoughtful as he continues. He says it was unexpected, as if Adele prefers younger men. Adele froze speechless and could only utter a shocked exclamation. Blushing and glowing, Adele shouted for him to listen, and Randall, crossing his arms with a sly smile, teased what happened and why are they saying such unrestrained words. He continued to joke that spring had finally come to the Knight Commander, while Adele kept shouting and was completely embarrassed. The issue with the Knight Captain is resolved. Randall and the former bandits have officially become mercenaries in the service of a domain similar to a ride, with Randall maintaining a stern face and Kate looking a bit stunned by this new deal. He settled in these parts and at their request took on training the local soldiers, sharing with them his extremely needed practical combat experience. The efforts brought stunning results. The factory is directly subordinate to Adele. He says their military power has grown much more than expected and calls it a happy accident, but it seems Adele has other concerns. For Adele, this happy miscalculation has a serious drawback. One devastating realization hits with full force: there is no money. The financial burden is overwhelming. Besides hiring Randall and his 5 men, they had to pay for Kate's damaged furniture and room repairs, and also S, with an insatiable appetite for snacks. Sudden expenses are simply off the charts. Clenching his fist resolutely, Adele decides that the next step must be economic reform. The end, Adele sets off to the neighboring town in the company of Kane and Sha. Entering the noisy market, Adele freezes in admiration at the grandeur and energy of the Rendhill region. This bright scene sharply contrasts with their own territory. Someone in the group says that although they had heard rumors, so many people really impress, quite unlike what they are used to. A local merchant told that Randhill is bustling with traders from different countries, and this gave Dell an idea. The magical devices their mother brought would definitely come in handy here. Nearby, Je suggested selling all unnecessary magical instruments. Walking through the market, Adele noticed that there were almost no traders of magical devices here, quite unlike their own lands. A plan began to form in her mind. If Randhill had specialized shops, they could sell their things there and earn some much-needed money for a while. Meanwhile, Je was thrilled with anticipation. She couldn't wait to see how the faces of the traders would change when they learned the true value of her mother's items. Kane was skeptical and hinted that these might just be old relics from a dungeon, which upset Je. Her hopes were clearly much higher. Interrupting them, Dell firmly said that they would soon find out in the shop, and the primary task, he insisted, was to raise a large sum of money. Then the pain turned against them. Someone loudly expressed concern. Was it really wise to go to Randhild without first notifying the lord of their lands? This question caught Adele by surprise. Her eyes widened, and suddenly she understood everything. The question caught them off guard. They stammered, because such a thought had never occurred to them. Someone coldly remarked that a true servant never acts without waiting for the master's order, and Adele quickly replied that she was not a servant. They tried to justify their actions by saying they only came to sell magical instruments and acted spontaneously, but Sia praised them, saying that unlike their territory, lively Randhild is full of opportunities, so there is no need to rush in job hunting, and she concluded that Adele's cleverness deserves admiration. Clutching his chest, he feels his heart pounding with anxiety. He wonders if this is really happening, calming himself with the thought that Master Adele will not lie to him. The tension is incredible. The source of his anxiety is the memory of the noble lady he desperately wants to avoid, Emelina, the only daughter of Marquis Fluge, whom her father spoiled so much that she became incredibly selfish and treated commoners like trash. Adele recalls that her character was so vile, it was almost laughable, a true villainess, and Kane looks at this with obvious disapproval. The thought of Milan presses on him like a heavy stone, bringing fear of a possible family collapse. He imagines a bleak future where lack of money and people could destroy the Riddle House. Shaking off a dark premonition, the group gets to work, but their first attempt meets immediate hostility. The shopkeeper brushes off their intentions as a nuisance, says he especially dislikes dealing with Sia, and orders them to finish quickly and leave, while Adele is stunned by his rudeness but still asks him to calm down. The next attempt also proves futile. The old buyer examines one of the goods and decisively refuses to buy it, leaving Sia momentarily speechless. Their temper does not improve. Shop after shop everywhere the same refusal. One owner apologizes but refuses, another admits he cannot even appraise such an item, and when he suggests visiting all the shops in turn, the depressed Adele protests or speaks sharply. Finally, in another shop, a man was examining a product through a jeweler's loupe, while his partners snorted mockingly at the collection laid out before them. He asked if they were just toys, and replied to come back when they had something more serious. One more shop, and again the same. Adele sank to her feet, realizing that this place too was a dead end, while Sia, her face hidden under the brim of her hat, quietly wondered if every store on the main street would refuse to buy her things. Quiet disappointment suddenly shattered. Sia rushed forward, her voice ringing with fury. She demanded whether everything had really been appraised, shouted that it could not be, that her mother's magical instruments were worthless, and demanded an immediate reassessment of the items. But Adele grabbed her from behind, trying to hold her back while Kane called her by name. She strikes a provocative pose before the usurer, challenges him, "Will you buy me in this outfit?" urges him not to stand speechless, and adds that it's not like looking at children's legs. Returns with a confident smile and runs into Adele and Kane in the doorway, their eyes wide open in shock. Adele immediately apologizes, stumbling, blurting out that they will leave right away. Stepping forward, Adele grabbed Zhe's hand and demanded to know what she was doing. Embarrassed, Zhe explained that she just wanted to attract attention and insisted that it was only a little flirtation. All her confidence crumbles, tears in her eyes, because she sees that after all this, he still won't buy anything, and aloud she asks herself if her magical tools are really just junk. She continued to cry. Adele and Kane stood and watched. Their initial shock turned into concern and irritation. Change couldn't stand it and apologized for calling her things junk. Adele pointed to the bracelet on Zhe's hand and asked what it did. Zhe replied that it was not a magical item, but the very one Adele praised. When you put it on, all her equipment appears on the bracelet. Adele now holds a large C, decorated with small, delicate flowers. Looking closely, she realizes that it is an incredible thing, and with sincere admiration in her eyes, exclaims in agreement. She angrily reproaches the witch, irritated. "Shouldn't you have understood how big and powerful this bracelet is?" He demands an answer why she didn't warn him earlier about the activation conditions, asking if those conditions were too minor to mention. His plan was simple and cold: to use her to sell magical tools and establish connections that would revive the economy of his holdings, but suddenly the bitter truth dawned on him. She doesn't even realize the value of her own magical items. Just the thought and a memory from the game world instantly emerges. The elf from the party, the one responsible for inventory and items. In that world, the town of Landhill was the main place where everything needed was bought. Returning to the present, he looks around the city and sadly notices how different it is from the noisy center he remembers, pointing out that nearby people are setting up stalls. He carefully examines the street stalls and says that although they are mostly small, something truly valuable might well be found among them. His eyes suddenly opened wide with admiration. He shouted to his companions to stop and look at what he had just found. A young noblewoman returns to them with a confident smile. She introduced herself as Milan from Landhill and asked if they needed anything, and Adele stares, completely stunned, realizes that the villain of the game himself is standing before him. He froze, his mind wildly trying to understand why she was here. Next to him, Jean, not noticing the tension, hurriedly and awkwardly apologized to the noble lady for this encounter. The noble lady Emelina noticed her gaze stopped on the young girl sitting nearby on the ground among a few modest items for sale. The child raised her head, frightened, when Emelina spoke. She sharply snapped her fan, her face twisted into a contemptuous smile. She demanded to know by what right the girl dared to sell such junk on the street, and declared that here her word was law. The scuffle attracted the attention of a nearby trader, and she explained to the invisible interlocutor. Emelina's words are indisputable because she is the daughter of the local lord, and even clarified this in human words, hinting that the young seller is not quite human. Her face twisted into a cruel, victorious smile as she loomed over the crying child. She called the girl's things junk and coldly ordered her to gather them and go away. As they walk through the city, the evil witch looks back and says that the person causes anxiety. Adele, crossing his arms, notes that such a great difference in conditions between these lands says a lot about their rulers. In the background, a boy from another world silently watches them, his face gloomy. Focus on the source of suffering in this land, the treacherous Emelina. He recalls that even in the world he knew, she had a reputation as a terrible person and seemed to have profited since childhood. He sees Emelina standing over the young girl on the street and thinks about how to intervene. A direct approach is impossible. Her guards will definitely stop him. And he also fears that if people see him with her in public, they will understand that he was the one who dealt with the bandits. He hesitates, the voice of the little seller cuts through the air. Kneeling, she begs the Meliner this time to close his eyes to her, saying that if she does not sell her goods, she will have nothing to eat today. Her pleas were met not with pity but with rage. Emelina's face twisted with disgust. She shouted that because of that girl the city stinks, and with tears of fury in her eyes ordered the child simply to go and die. This cruel outburst attracts the attention of those around. The young man silently watches, his face tightens. Other villagers turn and stare. One man mutters what a pity that this girl caught Emelina's eye, and the woman sharply orders the child to stop looking at them. At that very moment, Adele and the Witch of Misfortune appear nearby. The witch admits that she herself is beginning to feel disgust towards this scene. Adele spreads her arms wide and asks what is happening, and he is silent, lost in thought, because he knows any action now will inevitably provoke the wrath of Emily Nazer. He understood everything. In these parts, everything Milana said was law, and offending her meant inviting unknown persecutions upon oneself and one's relatives. Her father, who adored her, taught her this. The realization paralyzed him. He was not ready for a fight, and making such a dangerous enemy now would be reckless. He felt he had no choice but to let it go and close his eyes to the cruelty unfolding before him. Meanwhile, Emelina turned to the confused saleswoman with a deceptively sweet smile. Seeing that the girl could not cope alone, she offered help, and her voice dripped with false kindness. Her help came in the form of Swift Kick, who pushed the stew pot so that its contents spilled onto the ground, and she looked disdainfully at the girl, grimacing, calling her and her food trash that needed to be thrown away. She savored the girl's despair and coldly declared that she herself would make sure to get rid of her. Suddenly, a hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, making her freeze, and the saleswoman screamed, pleading for her to stop. The movement stopped at the last moment. Her foot was already about to crush the spilled food. The enraged Emelina demanded to know who dared to touch her. It was Adele. She met the fierce gaze of the noble lady without looking away and held her grip firmly. Then she calmly asked if Emelina did not think she was going too far. He smiles politely, though somewhat tensely, and apologizes for his rudeness. A young winter girl peeks out from behind him, and fear is still visible on her face. Emelina recognizes him. A mocking smile plays on her lips. She ironically asks if this young man is pretending to be poor, and why, without her knowledge, he walks around her neighborhood from shop to shop, trading some tools. Her facial expression stiffened into a cruel sneer. Then she asks if he has finally fallen dead, and with contempt notes how hard it must be for these poor people. She leans forward, her voice full of threat, and warns him that by choosing to fight her, he must be ready for the consequences. Adele is silent, his face expressionless. The witch and the armed guard watch. Shortening the distance between them, she moves her face just a few inches from his, and a cold smile spreads across her lips. She demands that little Adele state a reason for his interference that could be accepted. Emelina stands before Adele, wrapped in a fog of confidence, and demands a reason to believe in something. She addresses her condescendingly, Adele-chan, and Adele looks confused, fumbling for an answer. Suddenly, attention is drawn to a young street vendor sitting nearby on the ground, and a spark of an idea flashes in Adele's mind, a topic that might buy him some time. Turning back to Emelina with new calm, they apologized and said that their goal here was thwarted, and it annoys them terribly, subtly gesturing toward the street vendor as if to say she is to blame. She raises her eyes, confusion on her face as Emelina looms over her. Emelina contemptuously asks if this is the vendor she was looking for, and immediately calls her trash. She continues the verbal assault, surrounded by guards in armor. Emelin explains. She is in trouble, cannot open the shop, and hired a new vendor who sells tools on the main street. She adds that she herself is an excellent vendor. At these words, the street vendor lowers her head, shame shadows her face, and Emelin's voice echoes, calling her goods pathetic and useless junk. Adele pressed a finger to her lips and whispered to the invisible interlocutor that Emelina has not yet noticed what this girl really is. She says she is an exceptionally skilled vendor, the best in the whole city. The young street vendor points with a trembling finger, eyes wide with disbelief, and behind her Emelina and her two companions, a girl in a witch's hat and another in a strict suit, look in the same direction, their faces full of shock and confusion. All eyes are fixed on Adele, who calmly sits among the vendor's goods. She addresses the seller and, confirming the previous assessment, says that unlike that vendor from Main Street, she will be able to properly appraise the brought items. This, Emelina's shock quickly turned to suspicion. She clenched her fist and, noting how quickly Adele understood everything, asked what they were plotting. If Adele is so confident, she threw out, then let them immediately show those items. Agreeing to the challenge, she leans down and examines the scattered items on the ground. Her face darkens, and she mutters to herself that it's all just a pile of junk. Having assessed the items, Emelina burst into loud laughter, mockingly pointing out the miserable quality of the goods and saying it was shameful that the store even displayed such things. Nearby, the witch shuddered with rage and sharply replied that it was Emelina who did not know how to appreciate them, and her other companions quietly echoed this thought. Lifting one of the small dark objects, Emelina authoritatively declared who was in charge here. She was the daughter of Lord Rendale. Her sharp gaze weighed more than any doubts, and her last word was a verdict. This thing and everything else was just trash. The street vendor lowers her eyes, her face like a mask of despair, quietly whispering that even her modest old goods shop is better than such treatment. Her shoulders slumped, and she looks completely broken. While the young salesman froze, Emelina sharply leaned forward and demanded to inspect the item. "Let me have a look at this," she insisted, and a sharp command sounded in her voice. The item was handed not to Emelina, but to her companion, the witch Sienna, and when she looked closely at this exquisite object, her eyes widened in disbelief. She had never before seen a magical tool with such a complex design and could not believe that something like this even existed. The girl from Yandere, now holding another spherical artifact in her hands, looked at him with reverent admiration, bewildered by what was happening. Adele smiled and addressed her, noting that, as expected, the girl could see the true value of the magical item, but added that she would not accept payment for such a wonderful thing for any money, despite the girl's obvious confidence in its power. A confident, intelligent expression appeared on Melina's face. A small, cruel smile played on her lips, was sure she had finally figured out Adele's plan. But her words had a completely different effect on the girl from Winter. After a moment of confusion, the girl's face filled with determination. She accused Adele of simply playing along with the story to avoid losing her shop, and as a merchant, declared that she could not tolerate such a false assessment. Emelina leans toward the seller from Young Street and gives a month's delay. She will take the girl's bowl, which she contemptuously calls junk, and orders the child to sell it wherever she can to earn money. Standing very close, Adele notes to Sia that in her opinion, this bowl is worth at best only a few silver coins, and Sia agrees, adding that it is unlikely to sell for more. The smile on her face widens and becomes cruel as she continues, telling the girl seller that she can even crawl on the ground if necessary. The child raises her ice shock and fear on her face. Elle takes a step forward, unable to remain silent, and asks if it is appropriate for Emelina to speak like that. Emelina, completely unmoved, turns to her and with a contemptuous smile says that it is not a problem at all. Then she lays out her real terms. In exchange for her words, if that trash girl does not bring profit, she will be expelled from the country, and Emelina adds that Adele, who is pestering all the time, will also be dealt with. With a triumphant smile, she makes Adele a shocking offer. If Adele agrees to become her slave for life, she might reconsider. She even says that the contract can be drawn up later. Adele remains horrified and speechless. At that moment, a blonde woman in a suit steps forward, takes the saleswoman by the hand, and exclaims that such a price is too high. Emelina, noticing the interruption with surprise, looks around the group and says decisively, "So it's decided." She mockingly addresses the saleswoman with false friendliness, suggesting that together, like accomplices poppers, they collect money, and then, casting a condescending glance, adds that in a month she will gladly look at the results. After Emelina left, Adele and her companions froze in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The young saleswoman tightly clutched a small item in her hands. The figure of misfortune turns to Adele and asks if she is really ready for this deal, emphasizing that their sister's magical instrument has incredible value. Adele tries to intervene, but the blonde simply listens. Stunned, the street vendor suddenly throws herself into a deep bow. Her forehead almost touches the cobblestones. She sincerely apologizes for dragging them into her problems after they had already come to her aid. Adele quickly brushed off the apologies and insisted that it was their intervention that complicated everything. The saleswoman raised her eyes, her face flushed with emotion, and confessed that it was the first time someone praised her like that and that she was happy. Her face melted into a radiant, tearful smile she sincerely thanks. Meanwhile, Emelina, settled on several crates, asks the blonde about her plans regarding the saleswoman and says that the merchant who was with her has already fled the city. When Adele helps the saleswoman to stand up, Emelina mockingly adds that the shop and the man's goods were left in complete disorder. Melina's words fell on Adele like a heavy burden. She froze in quiet reflection, staring at the gloomy faces of her companions, and the Witch of Misfortunes noted that Adele is a real fuss budget. While Adele was pondering this, the blonde added more context about the city's troubles. Due to the Lord's influence, many merchants were driven out of the region, and because of this, others could buy up the newly vacated shops. Her explanation painted a grim portrait of the local economy. In short, she summarized, many legitimate merchants were pushed out due to the arbitrariness of the lords, and those who later stormed in and took the best spots turned out to be connected with Emelina, the Witch of Misfortunes, who, looking at the main street, asked if those traders were indeed the outcasts, to which the blonde confirmed. Listening to the details of the plan, a thought struck the witch's mind, and with a gleam in her eyes, she declared that this resembled the case of obstruction match. She laid out her theory in detail. Blocking magic does not allow a magical tool to present itself as such if a person does not have a certain level of evaluation skill, and the blonde added that this was why Emelina and others did not see the true value of the item. With this new understanding, the evil witch turned to Dell in surprise and asked if they could examine the magical item once more. She says with admiration, "See you, Bins," marveling at the impressive quality of the item, and confidently asserts that this is the work of a true master of magical tools, while nearby Adele quietly observes her admiration. Elsewhere, merchants were chatting about business. Uppenbroker says that, although the shop on the main street does not bring huge profits, it also does not provide even a tiny purse. The blonde in the suit intervened and pointed out to Zhe that she was praised only for magical tools, not for business acumen, and this struck an even sharper, stinging chord in Zhe. Meanwhile, unnoticed by others, a young street vendor experienced an epiphany. Her gift of evaluation turned out to be much stronger than she could have imagined. Realizing this, Adele approaches her. He sees that he can earn much more than expected from the bet with Emelina, so he asks the girl to wait and encourages her to believe in her own abilities. She lowers her eyes, not believing she can sell such a wonderful item. His words barely calm her inner storm. She believes that her eye for quality is all she has, but it is not enough, and suddenly a wave of determination washes over her. She must sell this amazing magical tool, no matter the cost. Desperation forces her to return to Zhe and the blonde girl, hands folded in pleading. She admits that she is not a merchant and does not have a shop, but firmly says that only she truly understands the value of this item and begs to be entrusted with its sale. Just as she could continue her desperate plea, Adele bursts in. He gently places his hand over her mouth and whispers an apology for the interruption, while Zhe and the blonde, who were watching, remain stunned. He decisively grabs her by the shoulders, forces her to meet his gaze, orders her to lift her head and hold herself proudly, asking why the merchant, who so confidently evaluated others now, behaves so pitifully. His words are sharp to pull her out of despair. He gently holds the young merchant's face, looks her straight in the eyes, and says that she deserves more confidence. So far, she simply has not had the right opportunity for her talent to shine. His words touch the finest chord within her. Overwhelmed with emotion, her lower lip trembles and tears roll down her face. He insists that she is a wonderful merchant. Through her sobs, she barely utters a quiet "thank you." Her gratitude quickly turns into determination. With a new fire in her eyes, she looks intently at him and says that he can count on her. She promises to live up to his expectations. Adele listens, a gentle smile appearing on his lips. Later, as they were leaving, the blonde next to Adele turned to him with a worried look and asked if he was really sure about his decision. She expresses her concern in more detail, pointing out that the girl is just an amateur and may not be able to judge well. Adele, calmly walking beside her and the butler, simply says that everything will be fine. His confidence is unwavering. He thinks that all they have left to do is what they are capable of, and their path leads to a grand, solemn building. A month later, within the walls of the Rendhill estate, Emelina sits with a self-satisfied smile and says that she did not expect such a result. She finds it amusingly audacious that someone dared to appear before her instead of a fling. At the Rendhill estate, Adele with her companions Kane and Sia sat on a plush sofa waiting. Kane glanced at their small group. Only one person was missing, but that was quite expected. Next to him, Sia, an evil witch, quietly sipped from Tiki. Their hostess Emelina, addressing them from the other end of the luxurious hall, inquired why they were still talking about such things, whether it was about fundraising, and assured that the person they were waiting for was just a little late. She handed over a document with a confident smile, explaining that to ensure they did not break their promise, she had prepared a written contract and asked Adele to first check its contents and if there were no objections to sign it. The young noble lady watched him and added that if things went beyond the agreed limits, a certain duke would suffer complete humiliation, to which Adele resolutely replied that he would become Lady Emelina's slave out of love. Without hesitation, he took the pen and began to sign, specifying the condition. He would serve only if the profit from the sold magical devices turned out to be less than a few hundred gold coins, and Emelina, watching him, quietly admitted that he really had results. The blonde in the suit smiled mockingly, confident. If that trashy girl did not show up, the victory would undoubtedly be hers. She contemptuously tells Emelina that the one they were waiting for was so late because she simply ran away, and adds that the girl was probably a beggar who fights for food every day, so the promise of a few silver coins was a rarity for her. Emelina comfortably settled on the sofa surrounded by guards, and Killy addressed the girl. She asked what would happen now if she admitted her stupidity and licked Emelina's shoes whether it was just some misunderstanding. Even before the blonde can respond, Adele interrupts with unwavering confidence. His gaze fixed on Emeline, he assures her that the girl will definitely come, adding that she has an incredible amount of money. Hearing his words, the door suddenly opened, and a breathless girl with disheveled hair ran into the room, apologizing profusely for her lateness. Melon snorts at the sight of the newcomer, muttering under her breath, "Trash girl," but she doesn't even pay attention to hair instead. She turns to Adele with her palms pressed together, apologizes for needing his help, thanks him, and says she arrived just in time. She sincerely shines with gratitude and says that it seems he has come a long way and that his behavior is completely different from a month ago. She simply answered yes, but Emelina sharply stopped her, and the lady, pointing a finger reproachfully, demanded to know if the girl had really brought the profit she had spoken of. Melon snorted disdainfully and looked her over with contempt. She said the girl clearly came empty-handed as she suspected. This worthless junk would never sell. The girl apologized embarrassedly. Her apology faded as she called from outside the window, begging that she could not manage on her own and asking to be let inside. Emeline turned around, her face a tangled surprise. Her surprise vanished instantly, her eyes opened wide in shock as a heavy wooden cart began rattling nearby. The source of the noise became clear. Near a large wooden cart stood a man next to sacks bursting with coins. A street girl proudly pointed to the haul and boasted that this was her earnings from selling magical instruments. The sight stunned Melanash froze speechless, her mouth open in stunned silence. Meanwhile, the girl scratched the back of her head shyly but with a proud smile, explaining that if she had a little more time, she could have sold even more, but this was the limit for work in 1 month, and suddenly looked up, asking how she managed. Silence was shattered, and in its place came fierce distrust. Emelina, her face distorted with rage, points an accusing finger not at the girl but at the silent figure of Adele, and shouts that this must be a lie, demanding to know what dishonest trick he pulled to achieve such a result. He raises his head, a calm, knowing smile spreading across his face, and he categorically denies having done anything like that. His confident denial throws me off balance. I stammer and cannot understand, while nearby a street vendor nervously clenches her hands and wonders what will happen if she admits that her success is simply a gift of her own skill. Emily's face twists with distrust and contempt. She demands to know what is being said here. Can any so-called trash ability really bring in such money? Again, accusations are directed at Adele and the young street vendor standing by the loaded cart. Pointing at her, Emelina demands that she explain exactly what deal she made. The girl can speak. Adele calmly intervenes. He explains that she managed on her own, from correctly appraising magical instruments to bargaining with the buyer. He continues and admits that his only contribution was to escort her to a meeting with the capital's nobility. This enrages Emelina. She points an accusing finger at him and shouts that he surely used his noble status to pressure the buyer, exploiting his weaker position. The street vinegar rushes forward to defend Adele, shouting that such a borderline nobleman as he could not have such influence. She insists that Master Adele only introduced her to potential buyers and nothing more, while Adele looks on, her face showing a painful expression from this confrontation. Convinced, Emelina issues a challenge. If they do not believe her, let them summon all the buyers for testimony. She is sure their words will prove her right, leaving Adele silently pondering the final. The vendor's face hardened with determination. Suddenly she was struck by an epiphany. She knew this would happen. It was inevitable, because she was enlightened, one of the original heroines of Magic Box. She recalled her original goal. In this story, Lit uses a special tool, the Magic Box, which appraises magical items and accessories, and also skillfully handles tools of any size, making her an indispensable companion on any journey. When this finally became clear, the elegantly dressed man explained that their only role was to set the stage so that Lit could perform. They will take Lit to their territory, where she will be bathed and given clean clothes. Meanwhile, Adele will take notes, and Randall will explain that manufacturers of magical instruments will buy items for the highest possible price. He noticed that some nobles won't even look at such things, but with his letter of recommendation, they will be able to approach the wealthy nobles of the capital. And then she returned to Lit, adding that the final touch was her famous negotiation technique, just like in the original story. Adele watched and a broad smile blossomed on his face. He knew the skills were real, but he also realized the risk they were taking. It was a reckless bet, but now he was sure they would win it. Then he handed the document to the stunned Emmeline. Her eyes widened in disbelief. This can't be. Adele calmly asked if she remembered the terms of their bet. Barely had she managed to answer when Sia and Kane appeared. Sia, holding the signed contract, declared that she herself would make Milena prostrate right on the ground wherever she pleased. She reminded the noble lady that she had signed the agreement and now had to keep her word. Refusing to admit defeat, she declared the contract invalid, sent forward her armored guards, and ordered them to forcibly seize the document, insisting that it had no power. In response, a blade flashed out with a sharp metallic clang, and Randall's voice cut through the tension, noting that now things had become truly interesting. The sudden change in the air stunned Milena. She saw how her guards, who had been walking confidently, now froze and trembled in place, and embarrassed and angry, demanded to know why they had stopped. The reason for their fear became horribly clear. Randall stood before them face in shadow, eyes glowing with palpable menace. Beside her, she pressed a dagger to Kane's throat, a predatory smile on her face, and asked if they were really ready to fight. Melena's face twisted in horror, her eyes wide with shock, and a strangled scream escaped her lips. Fear gripped her even tighter as she saw her own guards felled, their swords clattering uselessly on the floor, Adele standing nearby and looking with a cold, indifferent empty gaze, thinking how pathetic these provincial simpletons were, and from the floor Melina could only stammer, not understanding what was happening. Above, she saw Adele's presence not as people, but as monstrous shadowy figures with anxiously bright eyes looming over her, and this horror made her wonder why Adele kept such company. Adele broke the silence, looking down at the noblewoman kneeling. She was addressed, Lady Emelina, daughter of Lord, and was told directly it was she who had torn up their contract. Everyone at the table flinched at the accusation. One of Adele's companions, a young girl with a ribbon in her hair, steps forward and warns her that this offense could hinder her future social engagements. Interrupting, she turns her attention to the armored guards. They ordered the men to leave the room immediately. Although hesitant, the guards quickly complied, stammering with their sand. When the room finally becomes private, Adele stands again opposite Emelina and calmly asks if she truly understands what she has done by breaking their contract, while their retinue silently watches. The words hit the mark, and Emelina's face burns with shame. She trembles, her eyes lowered, tears gathering in them, and she cannot say anything. She remains silent, nervously fiddling with the hem of her dress. Randall steps forward, his face hardening, is preparing to intervene. He angrily demands to know what was at stake, insisting on hearing all the details. Turning a fiery glance at Adele, he challenges them though they have the right to give orders, and the blonde beside him seems to think the same. The argument breaks off. The humiliation of Emelina suddenly turns into a sharp, defiant look. Before she could take advantage of this new resolve, a street vendor named Lit rushed past and threw herself to the floor in a deep bow, begging them to wait. Emelina froze in shock. Randall looks at the girl pressed to the ground, his voice full of despair. Because of Emelina, others lost their jobs and livelihoods, and it is unbearable to him that literally the one who suffered the most is now forced to apologize, so he considers it wrong to forbid her from seeking justice. Adele watches the scene, a thoughtful expression on her face. An evil witch appears nearby, and it seems strange to her that Lit one Emelina wronged the most is now intervening to stop the events, so Adele silently questions her motives. Everyone was riveted to the scene before them. Emelina clearly flinched and only stammered confusedly when Litz appeared before her, and the younger girl's eyes were closed, and a barely noticeable, almost blissful smile played on her lips, as if she had taken the side of that noble woman. Her face changed, opened her eyes, and challenged Adele's authority with strange logic, saying that they were all girls about the same age, so the vague command to punish some Melina here was too indefinite, and she persistently asked, "Isn't that wrong?" The logic of the coat of arms left both Adele and the wicked witch completely exhausted and speechless. While they still could not comprehend what had happened, Adele saw how Lit turned to Emelina, who had already bowed, and asking why she was doing this, with a chilling ease suggested instead to have some fun together. Proposal shocked Emelina. A clear horror froze on her face, and Adele, completely bewildered by this sudden strange turn, only whispered the name Litz with disbelief. In response to their surprise, she simply threw a cold, confident smile. Her true intentions are now completely hidden. In the noisy city square, a young woman with reddish chestnut hair cheerfully addresses her companions, saying that, of course, she will arrange their market stall exactly as agreed. Nearby, Randall sighs strangely, Adele looks expressionless, and Melania steps back with a hint of anxiety on her face. Standing there, the townspeople began to notice the group. Whispers rolled through the crowd, someone asked what was happening, and someone else pointed. The little blonde was recognized as Lady Emilina. She was recognized, and a wave of panic swept among the merchants nearby. One groans and asks why she returned to their stalls, another swears, urging companions to quickly pack up, and a third tries in vain to pretend to be calm. Despite the noise, the red-haired girl turned to Melina with a wide, confident smile, ready to move on. Melina raised her eyes and felt unease. Something in this situation was different from usual meetings. The smile did not waver. She handed the girl a document. She reminded Emilina that according to the contract signed at the manor, it was time to play the role of a shield to attract customers. These words struck Emilina. Her face turned pale from shock and despair. After this statement, Emilina is led to the main street, which was once noisy, now quiets down. People froze and looked at her from afar with faces full of fear and suspicion. She froze in place, cold sweat clinging to her forehead, while the whispers of the crowd gathered around her. They asked why she was here and what she wanted, calling her the source of trouble and misfortune. The red-haired girl pays attention to a street vendor. Lit, like Randall, with arms crossed in irritation, demands to know what she is doing. Adele watches the scene with a gloomy expression. She turns back to Emilina, who is trembling, tightly closing her eyes. The red-haired girl sighs theatrically, yields, and says she understands there is no other choice. Holding the contract high above their heads, she announced to the crowd that the deal has no expiration date, then threw an ultimatum to the merchants. If they want this injustice to end, they must immediately stop their current trade. Her ultimatum echoed through the market square. She says simple apologies are not enough, and to earn forgiveness for their treatment of Lit, she demands that each of them fall prostrate on the ground right here and now. At this demand, Emilina steps forward, her voice trembling but clear. She thanks the girl and swears that this will never happen again. She turned away as Adele approached the red-haired girl, doubtfully wondering if she was truly satisfied with the outcome. The redhead replied that it was not about a simple apology, but about making them feel the humiliation they themselves caused by forcing apologies from those they offended. The red-haired girl addressed the group and politely apologized for the commotion caused. Admitting she was not entirely satisfied, she reconsidered her approach and decided it would be better to amend the contract and limit Emilina's future actions, because she can be very difficult. She explains to Adele that selling this service is a convenient way to earn money, like an advance, and with such leverage, she says, Adele will have no problem opening a shop in the capital. Adele seems to understand the logic, and the red-haired girl smiles contentedly at her own cleverness. Looking out over the city, they consider all options. Adele realizes that with the contacts and money from this deal, they can expect a much better place than where they are now. Emilina stands nearby and listens silently. Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of the Witch of Misfortune, Sia. She looked upset and loudly declared that she still had not forgiven that little rascal for tricking her with a magical device, then embarrassedly bowed her head and apologized. In response, Emilina raises a small, exquisite bracelet and calmly says she will praise this magical item until Sia is satisfied, calling its design wonderful, her face peaceful, but her words carry a hint of mockery. What else is there to look at? The girl in the red hat and Adele look at the exchange. Adele's expression darkens, anxiety in her eyes at the very mention of that magic. She continues sarcastically praising, saying it is an absolute masterpiece, incomparable, and thanks Chia for it. Irritated, Chia warns her not to get carried away and says that if this continues, she might wear it herself. Realizing the danger, Adele extends her hand for a long time. In one moment, Emilina's evening dress disappeared instead. She appeared in a revealing outfit made of dark ribbons arranged to cover only the bare essentials, and the red-haired girl could only stare, completely shocked and bewildered by this sudden transformation. Holding their breath, the spectators froze in stunned silence, their gaze now framed by the exposed legs of Emilina. Adele, Randall, and the rest just looked embarrassed, while Adele muttered, as the magic transformation faded away. Their surprise turned into shock when the truth became clear. Emilina's elegant dress had vanished, torn away by the power of the magical instruments. The red-haired girl widened her eyes, not believing that Emilina had really worn this. Adele looked away and blushed with shame. The instrument's function was absolute and was supposed to remove all other gear. She let out a piercing scream of humiliation. Her face burned with shame. She tried to cover herself, and nearby the voice of the Witch of Misfortunes cut through the noise and coldly remarked that one should not flaunt their figure so much with such a wonderful magical instrument. Adele, deeply humiliated, could only look at the floor. The next day, in the area where riders travel, Adele stands ready and asks which merchants have arrived. Kane informs them that the details are unknown, only that Milena introduced them as wonderful people. Expresses distrust and loudly asks if they should take revenge on Milena and expel her, but Adele firmly says that as long as the contract is in effect, they cannot. They wait to see how the fuss with Milena ends and pay attention to the main entrance, knowing that Mayor Shaw is probably dealing with the gates. Inside, Kane continues to explain the situation. He was asked to coordinate everything to provide information about other traders and finally establish contacts with several respected merchants from Randhild, but negotiations to start trade in that territory were not going smoothly. The weight of this long-awaited meeting presses on Adele. She anxiously realizes that today they will finally meet face to face. Meanwhile, somewhere else, another Emelina, clearly irritated, reviews a document and wonders why she has to be bothered with such a troublesome task. Everything depends on these negotiations. If they succeed, the economy of the territory, suffering since its separation from the neighboring region, will finally begin to recover, and with this hope, merchants abroad. When the guests were already present, Kane solemnly introduced, "Thank you for today's work," pointing to Adele, he said, "This is the heir of the Lord Adele Ridlick," and then smiling added that since the merchants came from the neighboring territory, the journey was quick. De Milana took care of step forward. Before them stood a young girl with reddish-brown hair. She introduced herself as Lit Moron. With a bright smile, she explained that she was the trader they had been introduced to and eagerly looked forward to working together. The presentation stunned Adele, and Kane they stood with open mouths, unbelieving. Ignoring their shock, Lit cheerfully waved her hand and sincerely thanked Master Adele for meeting with her. Finally, Adele found her voice and sharply asked why Lit was here, on her land, and they explained that they had specifically asked Emilan to find a merchant from the royal capital, so Lit turned out to be not the one they were expecting. A whirl of thoughts flooded Dell's mind. Lit turned out to be the very heroine from the original story, and her presence here could act as a signal of destruction. She desperately wanted to refuse her, so it seemed safer to send her to the capital to earn money. While they struggled with this internal conflict, she finally spoke, admitted that although she did not have the best business sense, she believed that staying close to Adele's sphere was the most profitable path, and Adele, still stunned, could only quietly utter a sound of agreement. Sensing their hesitation, Lit extended her hand and asked to be taken in, promising that her shop would definitely become a great support for the Rydlick territory. After a moment of thought, Adele shook her hand, and Lit beamed and confidently said that she was the best saleswoman and they could rely on her. And so, although anxiety still stirred inside, the agreement was kept. The new store solemnly opened its doors in the Rydlick territory, a coin shop on a busy cobblestone street, ready for business. After the recent fuss with Emmeline over the Rydlick territory, peace finally came, and they decided to open a new shop here. At first, it had unusual goods from the royal capital and the Landhill territory, but very quickly it gained a good reputation among the locals. Rumors about the quality goods in her shop and skillful trading spread, customers increased, and very soon her establishment became so popular that large crowds, even people from other places, came here specifically. Another client leaves, Lit cheerfully says goodbye. The bell on the door rings, and she sighs with relief, wiping sweat from her forehead. At least for a moment everything calmed down. Dell, with a slight smile, gazes into the bustling market and notices how alive this place has become. The servant asks about his plans for the day and adds that later Sia will come with sweets, but Adele says she has business first. He walks the streets, soaking in the lively atmosphere, and mentally notes that since Lit opened her shop, the number of people in this territory has noticeably increased. Slit too feels change as a wave of emotions overwhelms her, as she realizes how much richer the lives of people in this territory have become. Deep gratitude fills her, and she decides to truly thank the one who made it happen. Dell blushes when he praises her and insists that she did nothing special, but he gently dismisses her modesty, asks her to look around, and points out that thanks to her efforts, valuable herbs and even relics from the nearest dungeon are now accessible to everyone. He listens as Lid says she used her position to negotiate with merchants from other lands, and a warm smile plays on her face. He whispers her name, and a thoughtful expression crosses his face. This success was unexpected. He recalls the grim future he once saw, a future where that territory faded and fell apart within a few years, and now he understands that the system itself was designed to gradually diminish its significance. While he was digesting this, like kept analyzing, she noticed that although the territory is large and easy to visit, precisely because of this, foreign merchants might underestimate it. The realization struck him: there were many more paths to ruin than he had imagined. Her voice brings him back to reality. She admits that at first she just wanted to sell her goods, but everything changed because he saved her. She looks at him sincerely, pronouncing his name with reverence. She explains that she came here today specifically to repay that debt. She has no other plans, only a simple desire to express gratitude. A blush blooms on her cheeks. She nervously clenches her hands. Summoning courage, she asks if he would agree to eat with her later. She then extends a neatly wrapped package, explaining her invitation. Lunch. Adele is completely surprised. His restraint disappears for a moment. He freezes, embarrassed. A woman with pointed ears bursts into the room, shouting apologies and calling Dell from the floor where she sits pale. An exhausted Dell responds weakly, and Mesha rushes to her anxiously. She says with relief that she found them. Mr. Balan sent her specifically. She apologizes for her sweaty appearance and asks to keep a little distance for a moment, then smiles and says that now everything will be fine. Her confident appearance leaves Lit with wide-open eyes, and confused he stammers, and he is excused. Shah meanwhile turns away from the moment. Her face softens, and she quietly hides a small dark object in her blast. Ready, she returns to the others, announces that she is ready, and tells Lit that she can return to the man. She is clearly irritated, apologized for the trouble in the shop, thanked Mayor Shaw for the sweets, and promised to visit again as soon as she has time, then muttered under her breath that Mersh's golden hair is against the rules. Inside, her anxiety grew. She invited Adele to lunch, did not find her, and now is tormented by the thought whether it is due to lack of attractiveness or bad style, and in the background Mayor Shaw gently cares for Adele and encourages her not to give up. Walking through the town with Mayor Shaw, Adele listens attentively to the local. He enthusiastically talks about how everything has changed. Due to the influx of people, taverns and shops have grown, and the streets have become completely different. As they walked further, they were greeted by cheerful townsfolk. One woman called out to Mayor Shaw, jokingly asking if she and Adele were on a date, and an older man picked up the joke. Mayor Shaw blushed embarrassedly and earnestly asked them to stop. Adele looks at this exchange with a gentle smile and apologizes to the embarrassed Mersh. They laugh and say how friendly everyone is here, and Mersh hides her blushing face even more out of shame. Friendly atmosphere suddenly inspired a serious thought in Adele. She understands that it is precisely for this peaceful communication that she and Kane came here to explore the demonic lands and find the wall that separates these countries. A woman in a headscarf approaches and explains to Adele that because Adele always treated everyone openly and consistently, the townspeople feel uninhibited, relax, and joke freely. Touched by this, Mersha turns to Adele with a radiant, grateful smile and says that both she and Kane are truly grateful. Adele looks, and her expression softens as she quietly utters Mersha's name in her mind. The calm was suddenly broken by alarming shots. Two guards in armor rushed down the street towards them, waving their hands and shouting, "Adele, Mayor Shaw." Walking through the town with the servant, Adele was greeted by two guards, both Lang. The servant asks if she is inspecting the territory, but Adele waved it off. No, nothing so formal, and the guards, smiling, thanked her for the hard work. Her mood changes instantly. One of the guards, Bolt, says that Cindy and Lang are not on duty right now, so they should take Adele and Lid, who just joined them on the date, but Lang intervenes and insists that they are now the guards of this territory, which clearly puts Adele in an awkward position. Renla is questioned about his appearance on the parade ground. He confirms and says that since he became the captain of the guard, so many people captivated by his sword wanted to enlist under his banner that he had to train the recruits himself. He continued, addressing one of the guards. Thanks to the training grounds organized by Adele, we have all become significantly stronger. The check showed that Randall himself reached level 5, and that his magic, physical strength, responsibility, and loyalty all increased, so he urged the guard to visit there again soon. Dell walks beside Lit. Deep in thought, she understands that his appearance has once again breathed life into the city and brought the necessary money that can be spent on military training. Her thoughts drift as she gazes at that manor and thinks about how much has changed in just a few short years. When she arrived, the maid met her and kindly said, "Welcome back," barely nodding and immediately asking to bow. He found Kane waiting for him, a woman in an official suit standing nearby. Kane greeted him warmly, but even before Adele could ask about Balan, the woman interrupted and said that Balan was no longer there and that she is the president's step. Suddenly, a much taller Sia appeared with a huge lollipop in her hands. Kane's friend immediately scolded her, "Don't run errands for Adele and carry it, like a Chibawitch," to which Sia sharply replied not to call her Chibai just because she herself has grown a bit. Goodbye, don't pay attention to those reprimands. She tries to confidently state that she has already done it. In her mind, she reasons that unlike some, she is now in a growth period, and the difference between her and them will only increase. She playfully paid attention to Adele, throwing her arm over his shoulder and asking if the bag he was holding was a gift for her. When Adele, stammering, said her name, she winked and joked that if he desires that, he will grow just like her, and this thought opened doors for her. He just looked confused, pondering the passage of time. In these few years, not only Kane's height grew, his status really rose to level 12, and magic, body, and devotion noticeably increased. His reflections did not cease. The matter was not only that the city changed, the abilities of Kane, Randall, and every soldier under their command grew, and for Dell, this result was nothing less than a miracle for me. Despair and distrust of his own status froze on his face. Although he had risen from the second to the third level, the magical indicators barely moved, the growth rate remained negligible 0. 1, and he exclaimed in despair, complaining that for all his efforts, he had gained only 1 level. Despair grows when he recalls years of exhausting work, a struggle that yielded only 1 point. He imagines Mayor Shah, who simply lives her life and has already moved on, and this only sharpens his sense of failure. He clenches his fist, thoughts racing. He feels even the weakest debuff imposed by the game creators draining him, although he is grateful that Sia agreed to level up with him. He is overwhelmed by a gloomy realization. If this continues, his domain will fall, and he may perish alone. Dark thoughts suffocate him, and he hears Sia calling his name, asking if he is even listening. She says he is not and notices that he is pushing himself too hard because of an unbearable sense of responsibility. She then smiles broadly and offers a simple solution. Simply put, she explains that his servants can give him 1 lollipop as a reward for his hard work. She raises a large, colorful set to emphasize her point. Adele looks stunned and tears well up in his eyes. Overwhelmed with emotions, Adele sinks into the warm embraces of Marisha and Kane, joined by Sia. Marisha reassures him that everything will be fine as long as they are nearby to protect him. This assurance is echoed by the voices of the group. Looking at his devoted servants, his eyes shimmered with emotion because of their unwavering loyalty. A gentle smile appears on his lips as he accepts their devotion, and he realizes, although he is the weakest, their support makes him the strongest. His retinue looks at him, each with their own reaction. Kane snorted and turned away, pouting, while Marcia simply smiled, acknowledging that nothing can be done about their master's sentimentality. Soon Adele found himself before Balon, and with an apologetic expression on his face, he began to inform her of the news. She listens, thinking about years of peace. So far, his tricks to avoid the death flags he remembers from his past life have worked. He believes that if this peace continues, he will be safe until the beginning of the original story's events. And just as he felt safe, King sharply inhaled, his hand instantly grasping the wall to support himself as a sudden wave of anxiety overwhelmed him. He leaned heavily on the stone, and a gloomy understanding fell upon him. This deep calm seemed unnatural, like the eerie silence before a storm. Suddenly his head throbbed. Confused, he pressed his palm to his temple. Everything around was unfamiliar, and he tried to comprehend where he had ended up. Sharp hunger pierced him and abruptly threw him forward. He did not remember how he got here, and had no idea what would happen next. Somewhere else in a much calmer place, Balon presented Della with a large bouquet of white roses and asked which flowers would best decorate the office. Nearby, Sia smiled warmly and teased Balon whether he really called their master over such a trifle. Dell's quiet reading was interrupted by the sudden rush of a guard, bursting in and loudly announcing himself. He listens as guard Balt reports. During patrol, he found an unconscious child. Balt says her condition is strange and asks for advice. This makes Adele ask again what exactly he means by strange. The child's words, as if recorded in a repository, shocked. With wide open, frightened eyes, she declared that she is the Lord of Demons and that she was brought to the mansions. The revelation passed through Adele. She recognizes the name, Demon Lord Gilgard, the final boss from the game in which he was reincarnated. In the original story, Gilgard was an incredibly powerful being, but had to be defeated to complete the game, and Adele is left wondering why this last enemy now appears as a child in this remote borderland. Racer counts what he has. Meanwhile, Sia and her companion are already at a high level, while Kane and Randall are still growing. Military training in this territory is far from complete. They are not ready. Returning to the present moment, he looks at Balt, who again insists they are not in a state to fight, and asks how to proceed. Adele, with a grim expression, asks for confirmation that the boy fainted, and Balt confirms it. At that moment, another guard, Lang, runs up on his knees. He holds the unconscious child in his arms, says that this child is a stranger to these lands, and asks if the young master is okay, while Adele looks at the small, motionless figure, heavy thoughts in his head, and remains silent. Standing over the unconscious child, suddenly the boy who had fainted realized he was much weaker than he had imagined. He couldn't even stand on his own feet. Rising up, he leaned on his hand, and it ended up on Adele's head. He couldn't understand how this little, seemingly unreliable person could be the true Lord of Demons, and stunned by Adele's touch, she could only ask what was happening. Case saw the pale, exhausted face of another boy, Kane, who barely asked if he had brought something to eat. Even before Adele could answer, one of his guards, Bolt, shouted at Kane, reminding him that he had just been brought to the estate. Another, Lang, addressed Adele awaiting instructions, but Kane took command, ordered to go to the dining room, and commanded Mayor Shaw to bring them food. The guards immediately agreed, leaving Adele. He turned back to Adele, who was still sitting on the ground, and told him to grab his shoulder to stand up. The whole scene confused Adele, and as Kane helped the young nobleman up, he couldn't get rid of the thought, Who was this person really? In the dining room, Adele pulled himself together a little. He told Kane that he would ask the maids to prepare something for them to eat. Hay simply picked up a bowl of fruit from the table and told Adele to eat it for now, adding that for this the person would owe him a favor. Adele froze, completely stunned. He was digesting this strange turn of events, thoughts racing, and although the boy's sharp ears hinted at a demon race, it was not yet confirmed. So Adele decided first to find out who he was and why he appeared here. He looked directly at the unexpected guest and asked his name. Even before his companion could answer, Adele politely introduced himself at the dining table. He named himself Adele Ridlick, son of the local lord, and sincerely thanked for the help previously given. The companion smiled confidently, as if he knew everything, named himself Almodoval Gardival, and with absolute certainty, declared himself the Lord of Demons. Delk just froze and stared, stunned in the deathly silence. Del weighed the facts to himself. The name was different, so he could not be the Lord of Demons from the original story. She remembered that Demon was supposedly defeated by one hero, along with his family. It sounded too simple to be true, so she concluded that this person simply could not be the real Lord of Demons. Yet she felt that behind his words there was some scheme. Deciding to inquire cautiously, she turned to Kane and asked what had happened to the Lord of Demons' subordinates, as if their master had been overthrown by a simple stomach ache. He says with a tired look that after the resurrection, he found himself completely alone. There was no other choice, he had to wander in search of food, and eventually this journey led him right here. Strikeable, while the king questions why it would be strange for a resurrected king to be abandoned, she is simply overwhelmed with deep sympathy for his lonely fate. He continued, complaining that if only he had found provisions immediately after returning, he would have already conquered the world. It was the perfect opportunity to show his power, but instead he had to endure hunger. He feels crooked sympathy for them, caught in the whirlpool of horror, and in his soul says that this too must be a matter of fate. Suddenly Adele is struck by a chilling realization. Her face pales from shock as the familiar words of the speech finally fall into place. Her heart was pounding as the realization dawned on her. It was déjà vu, a memory from life before her rebirth. But she finally understood. His pompous speech was an exact copy of that humiliating self-deceptive phase from her past life. A scene instantly flashed in her mind, how she blushes from old photographs. He was not a Lord of Demons, he was just cringe, and she screamed to herself for him to stop because she could almost die from someone else's shame. She stood in a dramatic pose, feeling no storm inside at all. He explained that he was simply entering the role of the Lord of Demons, calling it chanibio, a phase of teenage delusions, and admitted that due to the influx of people, he was just trying to find something to eat, and the whole act was a way to hold on until his mind broke. It was then that a woman with long light hair and pointed ears, strikingly resembling Kane, appeared in the room. She carried a tray and announced that she had brought food from Master Adele, who, recognizing her, quietly uttered her name, Mershaw. Mershaw placed the bowl on the table, explaining that she had prepared milk porridge because she thought something light for the stomach would be best, thanked them for waiting, apologized, and left. Kane and Adele quietly agreed. When she returned to leave, Kane's gaze fell on a little girl with the same features peeking from the door, and he noticed with interest that she was of demon blood. The girl looked back at him, her eyes wide open with curiosity. Watching the woman walk away, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Dell's face. She hesitantly called out, as if checking the name she had just mentioned, Mershaw. She quickly apologized, embarrassed by her outburst of emotions. Mayor Shaw paused her departure from the room for a moment, bowed her head in apology, and moved on, while Kane watched her with a worried expression, trying to understand what was going on. He was still looking at her, not averting his eyes, tormented by the question of what could have happened. His thoughts returned him to the old self, and he hoped that perhaps she had recoiled from his majestic aura. In the corridor, Marcia froze silently for a moment, her face unreadable, and she quietly confirmed something to herself.